Chapter 1: The Descent of Shadows. The sky over Nanjing City had an unusual hue, a deep crimson blending into the evening blue, casting a surreal glow over the sprawling metropolis. Chen Hao sat by his small desk in his studio apartment, the faint hum of his computer filling the room. His schedule was predictable, even mundane: online lectures during the day, strategy games at night, and endless hours lost in thought. For someone like him, solitude wasn't a punishment but a preference. The world outside was chaotic, bustling with people hurrying about their lives, their noise and energy too overwhelming. In contrast, his room was a haven of quiet consistency. That was, until everything changed. The interruption began as a faint distortion on his monitor. Lines flickered, and the screen froze mid-game. Frowning, Chen Hao tapped the keys, thinking it was a minor glitch. But then the distortion spread to his phone, his smartwatch, and even the old radio he kept on his shelf. A voice emerged from the static, calm yet chilling in its clarity. "Attention, humanity. The apocalypse trial begins now. Survive and evolve." Chen Hao froze, the words sinking in. Before he could make sense of them, the room dimmed as a glowing blue screen materialized before his eyes, hanging in the air like a projection. "Welcome to the Apocalypse Trial. Trial type: Housebound Ascension. Objective: survive within your shelter. Complete daily tasks to grow stronger. Rules: leaving your shelter is prohibited. Starter pack delivered. Good luck, participant." Before Chen Hao could react, a soft light shimmered on his desk. A small package appeared out of nowhere, neatly wrapped in what looked like translucent material. His heart raced as he reached out to touch it. The package was warm, almost alive, and when he peeled it open, its contents revealed themselves: a loaf of bread, a bottle of water, and a simple notebook labeled instructions. He opened the notebook, flipping through its pages. The handwriting was neat but mechanical, filled with guidelines for what to expect. The words felt ominous yet clear. 1. Stay indoors. Safety is relative but achievable. 2. Complete tasks to unlock abilities and rewards. 3. Prepare for escalating challenges. The final line sent a chill down his spine: your success ensures survival, failure leads to elimination. The silence outside. Chen Hao stood by his window, peeking through the blinds at the world below. The streets, usually alive with honking cars and chatter, were eerily silent. A dense fog blanketed the ground, making it hard to see more than a few meters. He noticed movement, shadows flickering in and out of the mist. They were slow, almost hesitant, but something about them felt unnatural. He couldn't make out any details, just the way they seemed to drift aimlessly, as if searching for something. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed in the distance, a metallic clang followed by a faint scream. Chen Hao's hand tightened on the blinds. Whatever was happening, it was far from normal. A new notification flashed on the holographic screen. Daily task: survive the first night. Reward: level 1 enhancement. The calm tone of the message felt at odds with the tension in the air. Chen Hao stepped back from the window, his mind racing. Preparing the shelter. The instructions had mentioned safety, but his small apartment wasn't exactly a fortress. He moved quickly, scanning the room for anything he could use to reinforce the door and windows. His desk, chair, and a stack of old textbooks became makeshift barricades. As he worked, another notification appeared. Hint: your environment can be upgraded with materials. Adapt to overcome challenges. It was a cryptic message, but it sparked an idea. Chen Hao rummaged through his storage closet, pulling out duct tape, an old tarp, and a toolbox. He began sealing gaps around the windows and reinforcing the door hinges, working methodically despite the growing anxiety in his chest. The holographic screen chimed again. Progress noted. Plus 10 survival points awarded. Survival points? Chen Hao muttered, pausing to inspect the screen. A new tab had opened, displaying a simplified interface with his name at the top. Name: Chen Hao. Level: 0. Survival points: 10. Abilities: none. The screen hinted at the possibility of upgrades and skills, but most options were locked. Chen Hao made a mental note to explore it further once the immediate threat was dealt with. The first night. As night fell, the city outside transformed. The fog thickened, and the shadows moving within it became more defined. Chen Hao could hear faint sounds, soft thuds, distant whispers, and the occasional crackle of what sounded like static. Despite his preparations, unease crept into his mind. What was he supposed to do if something or someone tried to breach his shelter? The notebook hadn't provided much guidance on direct confrontation. A notification broke his train of thought. Daily hint: trust in your environment. Observation is key to survival. Taking the hint, Chen Hao moved cautiously to the window and peeked through a tiny gap in the blinds. One of the shadows was closer now, standing motionless in the middle of the street. It was humanoid but not quite right. Its limbs were too long, its posture unnaturally stiff. Chen Hao's breath caught as the figure tilted its head, as though sensing his gaze. He quickly stepped back, heart pounding. A new ally. Hours passed, and the tension grew. Chen Hao busied himself by studying the notebook, hoping to find clues or strategies. His efforts were interrupted by a soft chime, signaling a message on the holographic screen. System chat unlocked, communicate with other participants. Curious, Chen Hao opened the chat interface. The screen displayed a list of names, most marked as inactive. Only a handful showed signs of life, their messages filled with panic and confusion. One name stood out, Lin Yu. Her messages were calm, precise, and detailed. Lin Yu, is anyone else seeing these creatures? They seem to avoid light. Can anyone confirm? Chen Hao hesitated before typing a reply. Chen Hao, I've seen them. They're in the fog outside my apartment. What do you know about them? The response came quickly. Lin Yu, not much. They appear to be drawn to movement and sound. Stay quiet and keep your lights dim. We need to figure out what's going on. Their brief exchange gave Chen Hao a strange sense of relief. He wasn't alone in this chaos, and Lin Yu's analytical approach mirrored his own. The first reward. As the clock struck midnight, a new notification appeared. Daily task completed. Level 1 enhancement unlocked. A warm sensation spread through Chen Hao's body, and the screen displayed his updated stats. Name, Chen Hao. Level 1. Survival points, 20. Ability unlocked, fortify shelter, reinforce your environment using available materials. Chen Hao felt a surge of confidence as he activated his new ability. Guided by the system, he used his remaining supplies to enhance the barricades and strengthen the walls. His apartment no longer felt like a fragile refuge but a secure base. As the first rays of dawn pierced the fog, the shadows outside began to dissipate. The system chimed once more. Congratulations, participant. The first night has ended. Prepare for escalating challenges. Chen Hao leaned back against the reinforced door, exhaustion mingling with determination. The world had changed overnight, but so had he. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Chapter 2: Shadows in the Fog. Chen Hao barely slept that night. Even as the sun rose over the city, casting a pale light through the persistent fog, the world outside felt alien. The faint hum of the system's interface was the only sound accompanying him, a reminder that he wasn't dreaming. His apartment felt different now. With the barricades in place and the walls shimmering faintly thanks to his new ability, it seemed more like a fortress than a home. Yet, the silence outside was unnerving. He knew better than to believe it was truly safe. A new task. The system's chime jolted him out of his thoughts. Another blue notification materialized in front of him. Daily task: gather resources within your shelter. Reward: basic blueprint for defense mechanism. Chen Hao frowned, reading the instructions. He didn't have much in his apartment, just a few packets of instant noodles, a half-full jug of water, and some old tools. The notebook from the starter pack had hinted at scavenging and upgrading, but the rules were clear: leaving his shelter meant certain death. Gather resources, he muttered, scanning his small space. What could they mean? He opened the system interface, now more familiar with its layout. A new tab labeled Inventory Management had appeared. Curious, he tapped it, and a list of items in his apartment displayed before him, categorized by type. Inventory. Instant noodles, X5. Drinking water, 1.5 L. Rusty toolbox, contains hammer, nails, wrench, screwdriver. Books, weight, 10 kilograms. Chen Hao's eyes narrowed as he studied the list. The system was tracking everything he owned, even down to the weight of the books on his shelf. That gave him an idea. Scavenging at home. He started with the obvious, food and water. Collecting the instant noodles and water jug, he placed them on his desk, and the system immediately acknowledged the action. Resource collection, basic rations secured. Encouraged, he moved to the toolbox. The tools weren't in great condition, rust-coated the hammer and nails, and the wrench barely turned, but they were better than nothing. As he added them to his collection, another notification appeared. Toolbox acquired. Tools can be used for crafting and repairs. The real breakthrough came when he hesitated in front of his bookshelf. Most of the books were old textbooks and novels he hadn't touched in years, but they were thick and sturdy. Testing their weight in his hands, he realized they could be used to reinforce the walls further. Stacking the books in a pile, he activated his Fortify Shelter ability. The books shimmered, and a translucent layer of light spread over the walls, making them feel solid and almost metallic. Fortification progress, 20%. Basic shelter reinforcement achieved. A small smile tugged at Chen Hao's lips. He was getting the hang of this. A message from Lin Yu. As he worked, the system chat interface pinged, a message from Lin Yu flashing on the screen. Lin Yu, are you still safe? The fog hasn't cleared here. Something's moving in it. Chen Hao's heart skipped a beat. The fog outside his window was still thick, but he hadn't seen anything since the night before. He quickly typed a reply. Chen Hao, I'm safe for now. Gathering resources. What about you? The response came quickly. Lin Yu, same. Found some supplies in the hospital storeroom, but I can't stay here forever. Something's wrong with this trial. It feels designed. Chen Hao leaned back, staring at the words. The thought had crossed his mind too. The system's structured tasks, the rewards, even the challenges, they all felt too calculated, like pieces on a game board. Chen Hao, do you think someone's controlling it? There was a pause before her reply. Lin Yu, maybe. But that's not what worries me. The system says survivors will face escalating challenges. If the first night was the beginning, what's next? Chen Hao didn't have an answer. The blueprint reward. By midday, he'd finished gathering and organizing everything in his apartment. The system chimed again, signaling the completion of his daily task. Daily task completed. Reward, basic blueprint for automated defense mechanism. The blueprint unfolded in his mind like a vivid memory, detailed instructions etched into his thoughts. It described a simple turret-like device powered by kinetic energy. The materials required weren't overly complex: scrap metal, springs, and something to act as ammunition, but Chen Hao didn't have most of them in his shelter. How am I supposed to build this? He muttered, pacing the room. The system offered no hints, leaving him to puzzle it out himself. The answer came in the form of another notification. Hint: creatures may drop materials upon defeat. Observation and creativity are key to survival. Chen Hao frowned. He hadn't seen any creatures since the one outside his door the night before, but the system's words suggested they weren't far away. Preparing for nightfall. As the day waned, the fog outside thickened again. Chen Hao's instincts told him the second night wouldn't be as forgiving as the first. He reinforced his barricades, double-checked his supplies, and mentally rehearsed his plan if anything or anyone tried to breach his shelter. The system's screen lit up with a final notification for the day. Event: Fog Awakening. Creatures will grow stronger and more numerous. Prepare accordingly. Chen Hao swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the rusty wrench from his toolbox. The air in his apartment felt heavier, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. As the sun disappeared and darkness enveloped the city once more, he sat by the window, watching the shadows stir in the fog. The trial was just beginning, but Chen Hao was determined to survive. Chapter 3: The Fog Awakens. Night descended over Nanchang City, blanketing the streets in a suffocating darkness that seemed to amplify the ever-thickening fog. Chen Hao sat on the edge of his bed, wrench in hand, his eyes fixed on the barricaded door. The system's earlier warning echoed in his mind: creatures will grow stronger and more numerous. He glanced at the holographic interface hovering before him, the words stark and unyielding. Survival task: defend your shelter against external threats. Objective: survive until dawn. Reward: kinetic turret prototype unlocked. Chen Hao exhaled slowly, the weight of the trial pressing heavily on his chest. The first night had been tense but manageable. Tonight felt different, more dangerous. The first attack. It began with a faint sound, like the soft scraping of claws against metal. Chen Hao's head snapped toward the window, his heart pounding. Peering through a narrow gap in the blinds, he saw them, vague humanoid shapes moving through the fog. Their forms were elongated and distorted, with joints that bent unnaturally. One of the figures paused, its head tilting upward as though sniffing the air. Then it turned, its hollow, glowing eyes locking onto Chen Hao's window. The creature let out a guttural screech, its voice piercing the silence like a blade. The other shadows turned toward the sound, their movements becoming more deliberate. Chen Hao stepped back from the window, gripping the wrench tightly. His reinforced walls shimmered faintly under the dim light, a reassuring reminder of the fortifications he had made earlier. System assistance. The system chimed, its calm tone at odds with the chaos outside. Creatures detected: 3. Weakness: light sensitivity. A new interface appeared, displaying the approaching creatures as red dots on a grid. Chen Hao's apartment was marked as a small green square in the center. Light sensitivity, he muttered, glancing around his room. The only sources of light were the small desk lamp and his phone's flashlight. Neither seemed powerful enough to deter the creatures for long. A notification popped up. Tip: combine resources to create temporary light-based defenses. Chen Hao's mind raced as he opened the toolbox and rummaged through its contents. He found a bundle of exposed wires and an old battery pack. With shaking hands, he worked quickly, rigging a crude contraption. Connecting the wires to the battery, he attached a bulb from his desk lamp, hoping it would be enough. The barricade holds. The first creature reached his door, its distorted limbs scraping against the wood. Chen Hao could hear its low, guttural growl, a sound that sent shivers down his spine. The door shook violently as the creature began pounding on it. Chen Hao activated his Fortify Shelter ability, channeling his remaining survival points into reinforcing the barricade. The translucent energy pulsed, strengthening the door just as the creature's claws tore through the first layer of wood. The system chimed again. Defense progress, 50%. Fortifications holding. Chen Hao's makeshift light flickered to life, illuminating the room with a harsh glow. He directed the beam toward the window, where another creature was attempting to climb through the narrow opening. The light struck its face, and it let out a deafening screech, recoiling and falling back into the fog. It works, Chen Hao breathed, his confidence bolstered. Lin Yu's warning. The system's chat interface pinged, a message from Lin Yu appearing on the screen. Lin Yu, are you still holding out? The fog creatures are more aggressive tonight. They almost breached my shelter. Chen Hao quickly typed a reply. Chen Hao, I'm fine for now. They're attacking my door. Weak to light, but there are more of them. Her response was immediate. Lin Yu, watch out for the larger ones. I saw one earlier, it's stronger and smarter. If it finds you, barricades won't be enough. Chen Hao's stomach dropped. He glanced at the grid on the system interface. The 3 red dots were still moving outside his apartment, but a larger, darker dot was slowly making its way toward his location from the edge of the map. The larger threat. The pounding on the door intensified, and Chen Hao could see splinters flying as the creature's claws dug deeper. He redirected the makeshift light toward the door, the bright beam momentarily slowing the assault. But then he felt a vibration in the air, like a low-frequency hum. The red dots on the grid froze, and the larger dot moved faster, closing the distance in seconds. Chen Hao's instincts screamed at him to prepare. He grabbed the toolbox and positioned it near the barricade, ready to use its contents as improvised weapons. The system chimed again, the calm voice offering no comfort. Elite fog stalker detected. The door exploded inward, fragments of wood scattering across the room. The larger creature stood in the doorway, its form towering and grotesque. Unlike the others, it had a defined face, its hollow eyes glowing with an eerie intelligence. Chen Hao shone the makeshift light at it, but the creature didn't recoil. Instead, it raised one elongated arm to shield its face, growling lowly. "Great," Chen Hao muttered. "It's resistant." The turning point. The system's interface flashed. Emergency task: eliminate the elite fog stalker. Reward: resource cache unlock. Chen Hao knew running wasn't an option. Summoning every ounce of courage, he grabbed the rusty hammer from the toolbox and lunged toward the creature. The light distracted it just enough for him to land a blow on its outstretched arm, the sound of metal striking bone echoing through the room. The creature roared, swiping at him with its other arm. Chen Hao barely dodged, stumbling back toward his desk. Desperation fueled him as he grabbed a stack of books and hurled them at the creature, each impact slowing its advance. Finally, inspiration struck. He snatched the battery pack from his makeshift light, the wires sparking dangerously. As the creature lunged again, Chen Hao pressed the exposed wires against its chest. The creature convulsed, a horrible screech escaping its maw as the electricity coursed through its body. It staggered, then collapsed, its form dissolving into black mist. Victory and reward. Chen Hao fell to his knees, breathing heavily. The system chimed, the calm tone now sounding almost triumphant. Elite fog stalker eliminated. Emergency task completed. Reward: resource cache unlocked. Additional survival points awarded. A glowing chest materialized in the center of the room. Opening it, Chen Hao found an assortment of supplies, scrap metal, springs, and a small vial labeled energy booster. The system chimed again. Kinetic turret prototype unlocked. Blueprint updated. Chen Hao leaned back against the wall, exhaustion overtaking him. The fog outside began to recede, the faint light of dawn breaking through. The second night was over, but the trial was far from finished. Chapter 4: Forging the Future. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the dissipating fog, painting Nanching City in muted gold. Chen Hao stared at the scattered remains of his broken barricade, his muscles aching and his mind still racing. He had survived the second night, but the cost had been steep. The resource cache lay open on the floor, its contents glinting in the faint light. Scrap metal, springs, bolts, and other mechanical parts were neatly stacked beside the glowing vial labeled energy booster. It was the first tangible step toward building the kinetic turret, the tool that might keep him alive through the trials ahead. Assessing the aftermath. Chen Hao began cleaning up, sweeping splinters and debris into a corner of the room. His apartment, once a cozy refuge, now felt like a battlefield. The walls, despite their reinforced shimmer, bore scratches and scorch marks from the night's assault. The system interface glowed faintly, waiting for his attention. Status update: survival points available, 15. New feature unlocked, crafting bench. A new tab appeared in the interface, displaying a holographic blueprint for a crafting station. The requirements were straightforward: scrap metal, wooden planks, and basic tools, all things he now had. Chen Hao didn't waste any time. He laid out the materials on the floor and followed the blueprint step by step. The process was surprisingly intuitive, the system guided his hands as though it had taken over a part of his mind. Within an hour, the crafting bench stood assembled in the corner of his apartment, a compact and efficient workstation. Crafting bench completed. New recipes unlocked. The first recipe to appear was the kinetic turret prototype. Building the turret. The turret's blueprint unfolded before him, displaying a detailed schematic. It required the scrap metal and springs from the resource cache, the rusty toolbox, and a power source. Chen Hao frowned at the last requirement. The depleted battery pack from his makeshift light wouldn't be enough. The system provided a hint. Hint: nearby devices may serve as temporary power sources. Chen Hao scanned his apartment, his eyes landing on an old portable fan. It had been a forgotten relic in the corner for years, but now it might be his saving grace. He dismantled it carefully, extracting the small motor and wiring it into the turret's base. Piece by piece, the turret began to take shape. The main body was a hollowed-out cylinder of reinforced metal, with springs coiled tightly inside to create kinetic force. A rotating mechanism, salvaged from the fan, allowed it to track targets automatically. Finally, Chen Hao attached the motor, connecting it to the system's interface. The turret hummed softly, the faint glow of its activation light reassuring him. Kinetic turret prototype completed. Status: active. Testing the defense. Chen Hao set the turret near the broken window, where the fog creatures had first attempted to breach his shelter. The device swiveled smoothly, scanning the area with mechanical precision. He activated the system's test mode, which simulated an incoming attack. The turret sprang to life, its springs releasing a series of rapid, controlled bursts. Chen Hao had loaded small metal bolts as ammunition, and the device fired them with deadly accuracy, hitting the targets the system projected onto the walls. A notification appeared. Turret efficiency, 85%. Recommend additional upgrades for increased firepower. Chen Hao nodded to himself. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Lin Yu's call. The system's chat interface pinged, Lin Yu's name flashing on the screen. Lin Yu, are you still alive? Chen Hao smirked as he replied. Chen Hao, barely. Built something to keep me alive longer, though. What about you? Her response took a moment, but when it came, it was grim. Lin Yu, the hospital isn't safe anymore. Something breached the upper floors last night. I had to move. Found an old convenience store nearby, but supplies are low. Chen Hao frowned. Lin Yu was one of the few connections he had left in this nightmarish trial, and the thought of her struggling alone didn't sit well with him. Chen Hao, I'll figure out a way to help. Maybe I can send supplies or something. Lin Yu, you'd risk that? What if the system punishes you for breaking the rules? Chen Hao hesitated. The system's rules were rigid, but he had already seen that it rewarded ingenuity. Chen Hao, I'll manage. Stay safe. The Fog's Secrets. As the day wore on, Chen Hao began noticing subtle changes in the environment. The fog outside was lighter now, but it never fully dissipated. Occasionally, he saw flickers of movement in the distance, creatures lurking just beyond the veil. The system chimed with a new notification. Event announcement: resource zones detected. Accessible during daylight hours only. A map appeared, marking several nearby locations with glowing dots. One was a hardware store only a few blocks away, another a small electronics repair shop. The system provided a final warning. Leaving the shelter increases risk. Travel only if adequately prepared. Chen Hao weighed his options. The resources in his apartment wouldn't last forever, and the opportunity to gather materials for further upgrades was tempting. But stepping outside meant exposing himself to the dangers of the unknown. A difficult decision. He spent the afternoon fortifying his shelter further, reinforcing the barricades and crafting additional light-based traps. By evening, his small apartment felt more secure than it had since the trials began. But the looming question remained: should he risk venturing into the fog tomorrow? As the sun began to set, Chen Hao stood by the window, staring at the distant outlines of the resource zones marked on the map. Surviving the nights was only half the battle. If he wanted to thrive, if he wanted to find a way out of this nightmare, he would need to face the fog head-on. Chapter 5: Into the Fog. The decision gnawed at Chen Hao through the night. By dawn, the pale light breaking through the fog seemed like an omen, beckoning him to take the leap. He could feel the system nudging him forward with its cryptic messages and limited resources. The comfort of his fortified shelter was undeniable, but he knew survival meant more than staying hidden. With a deep breath, Chen Hao began preparing for his first foray into the unknown. Preparations. Chen Hao's supplies were limited, but he made do. He stuffed his backpack with the essentials: 3 packets of instant noodles, half a liter of water, and the glowing vial of energy booster. From his toolbox, he chose the wrench and a screwdriver, hoping they'd serve as improvised weapons if necessary. The system chimed as he adjusted his gear. New feature: Fog Suit. Provides minimal protection against fog exposure. A holographic blueprint appeared, showing a rudimentary suit crafted from common materials. It required layers of fabric, plastic, and adhesive. Chen Hao rummaged through his apartment, tearing down curtains and pulling out old raincoats. Within an hour, he had cobbled together something resembling the blueprint, a patched-together suit that covered his body and face. Fog suit equipped. Fog resistance, 10%. Additional upgrades available. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Finally, he activated the kinetic turret, setting it to guard the shelter while he was away. The turret's soft hum filled the room as it swiveled into position. He stood at the door for a moment, gripping the wrench tightly. Stepping outside felt like crossing a threshold into a new world, one filled with danger and uncertainty. The fog's embrace. The air outside was cold and damp, the fog curling around Chen Hao like a living thing. Visibility was limited to a few meters, and every sound was amplified, each creak and rustle making his heart race. The system's map guided him, a glowing green line marking the path to the nearest resource zone, the hardware store 2 blocks away. As he moved cautiously through the empty streets, he noticed the eerie stillness. Cars were abandoned in the middle of the road, their windows shattered. Doors to nearby shops hung ajar, their interiors dark and ransacked. But the most unnerving thing was the absence of life. No birds, no insects, just the oppressive silence of the fog. The first encounter. Chen Hao turned a corner, the hardware store looming ahead, its sign barely visible through the mist. He quickened his pace, eager to reach the safety of an enclosed space. A low growl stopped him in his tracks. From the shadows, a creature emerged, smaller than the ones he had seen at night but no less menacing. Its body was wiry, its movements jerky, as though it were learning how to use its limbs. The system chimed. New creature detected, Fogling. Weakness, direct blunt force. Chen Hao tightened his grip on the wrench as the Fogling advanced, its hollow eyes glowing faintly. Stay calm, he muttered to himself, planting his feet firmly. The creature lunged, and Chen Hao swung the wrench with all his might. The impact sent the Fogling reeling, its body crumpling to the ground in a heap of shadowy mist. It twitched once before dissolving into the fog. Creature defeated. Survival points earned, +2. Chen Hao exhaled sharply, his hands trembling. It was his first kill outside the shelter, and it left him both exhilarated and terrified. The hardware store. He reached the hardware store without further incident. The door was unlocked, and he pushed it open cautiously, the bell above it jingling softly. The interior was dim, the shelves lined with tools and materials. A quick scan revealed everything from nails to heavy-duty batteries, exactly what he needed to upgrade his turret. The system chimed again. Scavenge mode activated. Select items to collect. Chen Hao began loading his backpack, prioritizing items the system highlighted as valuable: bolts, a hammer, duct tape, and a small handheld generator. As he worked, a sound from the back of the store made him freeze. It was faint at first, like the scraping of metal against concrete, but it grew louder. Not again, he whispered, gripping the wrench tightly. An unexpected ally. Before he could investigate, a figure emerged from the shadows. Chen Hao raised his wrench defensively, but the figure raised their hands in a gesture of peace. Wait! Don't hit me! It was a young man, his face partially obscured by a makeshift mask. He looked as disheveled as Chen Hao felt, his clothes torn and his eyes wide with fear. Who are you? Chen Hao demanded, not lowering the wrench. Liang Wei, the man said quickly. I've been hiding here since the trials began. I saw you fighting that Fogling outside. You're a survivor, right? Chen Hao narrowed his eyes. What's it to you? Liang Wei hesitated. Look, I don't want any trouble. I've been scavenging to stay alive, but I can't do this alone. We're stronger together. Chen Hao studied him for a moment, weighing his options. Trusting a stranger in this nightmare was a gamble, but the prospect of having someone watch his back was tempting. Fine, he said finally. But if you try anything, you're on your own. Liang Wei nodded eagerly. Deal. A new partnership. Together, they finished scavenging the store, gathering more supplies than Chen Hao could have managed alone. Liang Wei proved resourceful, finding a hidden stash of canned food and even a crowbar, which he claimed as his weapon. As they prepared to leave, the system chimed. Team feature unlocked. Survivors may share resources and tasks for efficiency. Chen Hao glanced at Liang Wei. Looks like the system approves. Liang Wei chuckled nervously. Let's hope it doesn't regret it. The journey back. The trip back to Chen Hao's shelter was tense. The fog seemed thicker now, and faint growls echoed in the distance. They moved quickly, their eyes darting to every shadow. When they reached the apartment building, Chen Hao ushered Liang Wei inside, locking the door behind them. The kinetic turret whirred softly, tracking their movements but not firing. Liang Wei let out a low whistle. You've got a real setup here. It's not much, Chen Hao said, dropping his backpack onto the floor. But it's kept me alive. He began unpacking the supplies, mentally cataloging everything they had found. With Liang Wei's help, they had enough materials to upgrade the turret and fortify the shelter further. The next step. As night fell, Chen Hao and Liang Wei sat in the dimly lit apartment, the glow of the system's interface casting long shadows. The fog outside thickened again, the now familiar sounds of creatures stirring in the distance. Chen Hao opened the system map, his eyes drifting to the other marked resource zones. The trials were escalating, and staying one step ahead meant taking risks. We'll need to go out again tomorrow, he said. Liang Wei nodded. I'm in. The fog outside whispered of dangers yet unseen, but for the first time, Chen Hao didn't feel entirely alone. Chapter 6, The Resource Run. The following morning, the air felt heavier than before, the fog denser and more alive, as though it sensed Chen Hao and Liang Wei's plans to challenge it again. The system interface pulsed softly, its notifications waiting to be acknowledged. Daily event, Enhanced Resource Zone, Electronics Repair Shop. Warning, increased creature activity detected. Chen Hao frowned. The notification was both an opportunity and a threat. If they succeeded, the electronics repair shop could yield invaluable upgrades, but the creatures would likely be stronger and more aggressive than ever. It's marked as enhanced, Liang Wei noted, peering over Chen Hao's shoulder. That means better rewards, right? Yeah, Chen Hao replied. But also more danger. We'll need to gear up, Liang Wei said, cracking his knuckles. Chen Hao nodded, his mind already working through the preparations. Upgrading the shelter. Before venturing out, they used the supplies from the hardware store to improve the defenses and prepare for the challenges ahead. 1. Kinetic turret upgrade. Using the small generator they found, Chen Hao boosted the turret's power supply, increasing its firing rate and range. A test shot sent bolts flying with enough force to embed deeply into the reinforced walls. 2. Fog suit reinforcement. Liang Wei suggested layering more plastic and duct tape onto the suits for additional protection. They also cut up old rain boots to fashion crude leg guards. 3. Improvised weapons. Chen Hao crafted a makeshift spear from a broomstick and a sharp piece of metal, while Liang Wei modified the crowbar with barbed wire for extra impact. By the time they finished, their small apartment looked more like a workshop than a living space. The electronics repair shop. The journey to the repair shop took them deeper into the fog than Chen Hao had ever ventured before. The map projected by the system guided their steps, but the growing unease in his chest reminded him that the system didn't always tell the whole story. The streets were eerily quiet, the only sounds their careful footsteps and the occasional distant growl. Twice, they spotted movement in the fog, shadows flitting at the edge of their vision, but the creatures didn't approach. Do you think they're watching us? Liang Wei whispered, gripping his crowbar tightly. Maybe, Chen Hao replied. or waiting for the right moment. The shop's entrance. The electronics repair shop was a squat building with a cracked neon sign still faintly flickering in the fog. The door was ajar, and the faint smell of burnt wires wafted out. "Stay close," Chen Hao said as they entered, their makeshift weapons raised. Inside, the shop was dimly lit by a single emergency light in the corner. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with circuit boards, batteries, and other electronic components. The system chimed. Resource zone, scavenge mode active. The interface highlighted several items of interest: high-capacity batteries, wiring kits, and a portable solar panel tucked away in the back. The ambush. As Chen Hao reached for a battery pack, a low growl echoed from the shadows. His heart leapt as he turned to see a creature emerging from behind the counter. It was larger than the Foblings, its body more solid and its movements deliberate. New creature detected, Fog Brute. Strength, high. Weakness, limited agility. The Fog Brute roared, its massive arms swinging as it charged. "Split up!" Chen Hao shouted, diving to the side as the creature's fist slammed into the ground where he had been standing. Liang Wei circled around, swinging his modified crowbar at the creature's legs. The barbs tore into its flesh, causing it to stumble with a guttural snarl. Chen Hao took the opportunity to jab at its torso with his makeshift spear, the sharp metal tip piercing its thick hide. The Fog Brute howled, swiping wildly. Its claws grazed Chen Hao's arm, tearing through his suit and drawing blood. He bit back a cry, focusing on keeping his distance. "Keep moving!" Liang Wei shouted, landing another hit on the creature's side. The system chimed again. Tip: use environmental hazards to your advantage. Chen Hao's eyes darted around the room, landing on a stack of precariously balanced shelves. "Over here," he called, baiting the Fog Brute toward him. As the creature charged, Chen Hao grabbed a loose wire from one of the shelves, yanking it free. Sparks flew as the wire snapped, and the shelves toppled, burying the Fog Brute under a cascade of heavy equipment. The creature let out one last roar before falling silent, its body dissolving into mist. Fog Brute defeated. Survival points earned, +10. The escape. The noise had drawn attention. From outside, the sound of growls and scraping claws grew louder. Chen Hao and Liang Wei worked quickly, grabbing the highlighted items and stuffing them into their backpacks. "We need to move," Liang Wei urged, glancing nervously at the door. They sprinted back toward the apartment, the fog seeming to press in around them. Shadows darted at the edges of their vision, and once, a clawed hand reached out from the mist, narrowly missing Liang Wei's leg. Chen Hao activated the map, their green path glowing brighter as they neared the shelter. "Almost there," he shouted. "Safe haven." The kinetic turret whirred to life as they approached, firing a warning shot that scattered the pursuing creatures. They burst through the door, slamming it shut behind them and collapsing onto the floor, gasping for breath. The turret continued firing outside, the sound of bolts striking metal and flesh echoing through the fog. Finally, the system chimed. Threat neutralized. Shelter secure. Chen Hao leaned back against the wall, his chest heaving. Liang Wei sat beside him, a grin spreading across his face. "That was insane," Liang Wei said, laughing breathlessly. "But we made it," Chen Hao replied, holding up the battery pack. "And we've got what we need." Planning ahead. As night fell, they worked together to integrate the new components into the turret and repair their suits. The high-capacity batteries boosted the turret's power, while the solar panel provided a sustainable energy source for future upgrades. For the first time since the trials began, Chen Hao felt a spark of hope. But as he lay in bed that night, staring at the faint glow of the system interface, he couldn't shake the feeling that the challenges ahead would only grow more dangerous. The fog was alive, and it wasn't done with them yet. Chapter 7: The Hidden Code. The fog outside was quieter than usual that morning, but the silence felt unnatural. Chen Hao woke with a lingering sense of unease. He sat at the edge of his makeshift bed, staring at the glowing system interface as it displayed a series of new notifications. Daily update: resource zones refreshed. Warning: unusual anomalies detected in Sector 3B. Discovery feature activated, hidden files unlocked. Chen Hao frowned. The last notification was new. He tapped on it, and a holographic screen expanded before him, filled with lines of glowing text. Liang Wei, already awake and fiddling with the turret settings, glanced over. "What's that?" Liang Wei asked, stepping closer. "Not sure," Chen Hao replied, scrolling through the text. "Looks like data logs?" The logs were labeled cryptically: trial initialization, fog density algorithms, and subject response metrics. One file, marked with a flashing red icon, caught his attention: sector override protocols. Chen Hao tapped it. The system hesitated before displaying a warning. Unauthorized access may lead to severe consequences. Proceed? Liang Wei raised an eyebrow. That looks risky. Chen Hao smirked. Since when has this place been safe? He tapped proceed. Unlocking the code. The file opened, revealing a jumble of code and fragmented sentences. Most of it was indecipherable, but a few lines stood out. Fog density linked to subject stress levels. Anomalies triggered by unstable nodes. Override requires access key, epsilon 3. Stress levels? Liang Wei muttered. Are they messing with us on purpose? It's not just survival, Chen Hao said, his voice tinged with frustration. They're studying us. Testing how we react under pressure. He continued scanning the file until he found a highlighted section. Hidden node detected, central server access point in Sector 3B. The map updated, marking a distant location deep within the fog. That's far, Liang Wei said, squinting at the map. And if the anomalies are there? Chen Hao nodded grimly. It's probably crawling with creatures. But if we can reach it, we might be able to learn more, or even shut this thing down. Preparing for the journey. They spent the rest of the day preparing for the trek to Sector 3B. The upgrades they'd made to the shelter and turret gave them a slight edge, but the dangers ahead would require more than brute force. Chen Hao focused on crafting new tools. Using the wiring kits and spare circuit boards from the electronics shop, he built a basic signal jammer. If the creatures were being controlled by the system, the jammer might disrupt their coordination. Liang Wei worked on mobility, modifying their fog suits by adding lightweight metal plates scavenged from broken appliances. The added protection made the suits heavier, but they agreed it was worth the trade-off. By evening, their gear was as ready as it could be. They packed extra food, water, and the portable solar panel, ensuring they'd have enough resources to last the journey. Into the depths. The next morning, the fog seemed thicker than ever, its tendrils twisting unnaturally as though aware of their intentions. Chen Hao activated the jammer, which emitted a faint hum. Let's hope this works, he muttered as they stepped into the fog. The journey to Sector 3B was harrowing. The creatures were more aggressive than before, their glowing eyes appearing frequently in the distance. The jammer seemed to confuse them, causing them to hesitate before attacking, but it didn't deter them completely. At one point, a pack of foblings surrounded them, their guttural growls sending chills down Chen Hao's spine. Liang Wei swung his crowbar, keeping them at bay while Chen Hao used his spear to pick them off one by one. Creatures defeated. Survival points earned, plus 15. The battles left them exhausted, but they pressed on, driven by the promise of answers. The central server. As they approached the marked location, the fog began to thin, revealing a strange structure in the middle of an abandoned park. It looked like a giant metal obelisk, its surface smooth and featureless except for faint, pulsing lights. The system chimed. Hidden node discovered, central server access point. Chen Hao and Liang Wei exchanged glances. This is it, Chen Hao said, stepping forward cautiously. The obelisk's lights grew brighter as they approached, and a panel slid open, revealing a small console. A new notification appeared. Override protocol active. Enter access key, epsilon 3. Chen Hao typed the code from the data log into the console. The obelisk vibrated slightly, and the lights shifted to a deep blue. Override accepted. Data stream unlocked. The console projected a massive hologram, displaying a web of interconnected nodes. At the center was a glowing red sphere labeled Core System. The truth unveiled. Fragments of data began to play across the hologram. Trial initiators, unknown entity. Primary objective, behavioral analysis under extreme conditions. Subjects selected based on psychological profiles. It's all a test, Liang Wei said, his voice filled with anger. They're watching us, experimenting on us like lab rats. Chen Hao's jaw tightened. Then we need to find the core system and end this. The console beeped, displaying a final message. Core location available. Access requires 3 override keys. The map updated again, marking 3 new locations scattered across the city. Each was labeled with a different key, Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. A new mission. As the hologram faded, the obelisk emitted a low hum, and the fog around them seemed to stir. A notification appeared. Warning, high-level creatures approaching. Prepare for combat. Chen Hao turned to Liang Wei, his grip tightening on his spear. Looks like they're not happy we found this. Then let's show them why they should have left us alone, Liang Wei replied, raising his crowbar. The growls grew louder, the shadows in the fog moving closer. Chen Hao activated the signal jammer, its hum resonating through the air. This is just the beginning, Chen Hao said, his eyes fixed on the encroaching darkness. But for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were fighting back. Chapter 8, The Alpha Key. The fog swirled violently, the air charged with an ominous energy as growls echoed closer. Chen Hao and Liang Wei tightened their grips on their weapons. The map glowed faintly on Chen Hao's interface, marking the locations of the 3 override keys, Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. Alpha is the closest, Chen Hao said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Liang Wei nodded. Let's deal with this mess first. The first creature emerged from the fog, a grotesque hybrid of the phoblings they'd faced before, but larger and more twisted. Its limbs were elongated, tipped with sharp claws, and its glowing eyes burned with an unnatural intensity. New creature detected, Fogstalker. Speed, high. Weakness, head vulnerability. Stay sharp, Chen Hao warned, raising his spear. The fight for survival. The Fogstalker lunged at them, its speed almost too fast to track. Chen Hao sidestepped just in time, thrusting his spear forward. The creature twisted mid-air, avoiding the attack with a guttural screech. Liang Wei swung his crowbar at its legs, connecting with a sickening crunch. The Fogstalker stumbled but quickly recovered, circling them like a predator sizing up its prey. We need to hit its head. Liang Wei shouted, swinging again as the creature feinted toward him. Chen Hao's mind raced. The creature was too agile for their current weapons. He glanced at the signal jammer clipped to his belt and had an idea. Cover me, he yelled, detaching the jammer. Liang Wei grunted in acknowledgement, stepping forward to distract the Fogstalker. The creature hissed, slashing at Liang Wei's reinforced suit. Sparks flew as its claws scraped against the metal plating. Chen Hao adjusted the jammer's frequency, increasing its output. The hum grew louder, and the creature faltered, shaking its head violently as though in pain. Now! Chen Hao shouted. Liang Wei didn't hesitate. He leapt forward, bringing the crowbar down with all his strength. The barbs tore into the creature's skull, and it collapsed with a final, guttural cry. Fogstalker defeated. Survival points earned, plus 20. A new threat. The victory was short-lived. More growls echoed through the fog, and the system issued a grim warning. Creature density increasing. Recommend evacuation. We can't fight them all, Liang Wei said, wiping blood from his crowbar. Let's move. They sprinted toward the waypoint for the Alpha Key. The streets became increasingly treacherous, littered with debris and half-dissolved corpses of previous victims. Creatures appeared sporadically, but the signal jammer kept them disoriented enough for Chen Hao and Liang Wei to slip past. Finally, they reached their destination, an old subway station buried beneath layers of fog and rubble. The waypoint hovered over its entrance, glowing faintly. Resource zone, Alpha Key detected below. Descent into darkness. The subway station was eerily quiet, its walls covered in moss and strange glowing symbols. The air felt heavy, as though the fog had seeped into the very structure. Creepy, Liang Wei muttered, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness. Chen Hao activated the system's mapping feature, which highlighted a path through the station. The Alpha Key is deep underground, he said. They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing off the damp walls. The deeper they went, the stronger the fog became, and the glowing symbols on the walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with their steps. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves in a large chamber. At the center stood a pedestal, and atop it was a glowing artifact, the Alpha Key. Alpha Key detected. Warning, Guardian active. Of course there's a Guardian, Liang Wei said, rolling his eyes. The Guardian awakens. As soon as Chen Hao stepped toward the pedestal, the ground shook. A massive creature emerged from the shadows, its form a grotesque amalgamation of metal and flesh. Its glowing red eyes locked onto them, and a deafening roar filled the chamber. New creature detected, Alpha Guardian. Strength, high. Weakness, energy core exposure during attacks. The Alpha Guardian charged, its movements surprisingly fast for its size. Chen Hao and Liang Wei dove in opposite directions as its massive claw smashed into the ground, leaving a crater where they had been standing. We have to expose the core. Chen Hao shouted, dodging another swipe. The creature's chest briefly opened during its attacks, revealing a pulsating energy core. Chen Hao hurled his spear, aiming for the core, but the creature twisted, deflecting the attack. Liang Wei circled behind the Guardian, using the distraction to land a blow on its back. The barbed crowbar tore into its flesh, causing the creature to roar in pain. Keep it distracted. Chen Hao called out, grabbing a piece of debris from the ground. He activated the jammer again, amplifying its output. The creature faltered, its movements becoming erratic as it struggled against the disruption. Seizing the opportunity, Chen Hao sprinted toward the pedestal. He grabbed the Alpha Key, a wave of energy coursing through him as the artifact's power synced with the system. Alpha Key acquired. Override progress, 33%. A narrow escape. The Guardian roared in fury, its movements growing more frenzied. Chen Hao and Liang Wei knew they couldn't defeat it with their current equipment. Run! Chen Hao shouted, clutching the Alpha Key tightly. They sprinted back through the subway, the Guardian's thundering footsteps close behind. The glowing symbols on the walls began to fade, and the fog seemed to retreat as they ascended toward the surface. Just as they reached the exit, the Guardian stopped, its massive frame unable to fit through the narrow stairwell. It let out a final, deafening roar before retreating into the darkness. The first piece. Back at the shelter, Chen Hao placed the Alpha Key on the workbench. The system chimed, projecting a new message. Key integration in progress. Prepare for increased hostility in all sectors. So, things are about to get worse, Liang Wei said, slumping into a chair. Chen Hao nodded. But we're one step closer to shutting this down. The map updated again, marking the locations of the Beta and Gamma keys. Chen Hao stared at the glowing waypoints, determination hardening his gaze. We'll rest tonight, he said. Tomorrow, we go for Beta. The fog outside thickened, as if sensing their defiance. But for the first time, Chen Hao felt they had the upper hand, if only for a moment. Chapter 9, The Beta Key. The next morning, Chen Hao woke to the sound of the system chiming incessantly. He rubbed his eyes and checked the notifications. Beta Key location confirmed. Warning, extreme creature activity detected in Sector 4C. Temporary buff unlocked, fog resistance increased for 12 hours. Fog resistance? Liang Wei asked as Chen Hao explained the notification. Chen Hao nodded. It might buy us some time against the fog's effects, but it won't protect us from the creatures. Liang Wei stretched, his expression grim but determined. Then we'd better not waste those 12 hours. The map highlighted Sector 4C, a distant industrial area on the outskirts of the city. It was a sprawling zone filled with abandoned factories and warehouses, a perfect labyrinth for dangerous creatures to lurk. Preparation. Before heading out, they made additional upgrades to their gear. Using scraps from the Alpha Key's housing, Chen Hao fashioned a crude energy shield generator. The shield could absorb 1 or 2 hits before needing to recharge. Liang Wei, always favoring brute force, reinforced his crowbar further with jagged shards of metal scavenged from the shelter's storage. "I'd say we look like real survivors now," Liang Wei joked, inspecting their makeshift armor and weapons. Chen Hao smiled faintly. "Let's just hope it's enough." Into the industrial zone. The journey to Sector 4C was uneventful at first, the fog seeming almost subdued. But as they drew closer, the air grew heavier, and a low, constant hum resonated in the distance. The industrial zone loomed ahead, its towering factories casting eerie shadows in the fog. The waypoint led them to a massive warehouse, its rusted doors barely hanging on their hinges. "Looks inviting," Liang Wei said sarcastically. Chen Hao checked the system map. The beta key was marked deep inside the building, but the map also highlighted numerous creature signatures moving within. "Stay close," Chen Hao said, activating the energy shield. Inside the warehouse. The interior of the warehouse was a maze of towering shelves, most of them empty or collapsed. The sound of dripping water echoed through the vast space, mingling with the faint growls of unseen creatures. The system chimed softly. "Beta key location, sub-level access required." A waypoint marked a staircase at the far end of the warehouse. As they moved cautiously through the aisles, Chen Hao caught glimpses of movement in the shadows. "Something's watching us," he whispered. Liang Wei nodded, gripping his crowbar tightly. "Let it watch. If it gets close, it's getting smashed." The sub-level. The staircase led to a sub-level filled with machinery and storage crates. The air here was colder, and the fog seemed thicker, swirling unnaturally around them. The system pinged again. "Guardian detected, Fog Weaver. Ability, Illusions and Traps. Weakness, Disruptive Energy Fields." Almost on cue, the fog began to shift, forming shapes and shadows that danced at the edges of their vision. Chen Hao felt a wave of unease wash over him as the illusions grew clearer, taking on the forms of people he recognized, friends, family, even his younger self. "Don't trust what you see," Chen Hao shouted, activating the signal jammer. The illusions flickered, but they didn't disappear entirely. Liang Wei swung his crowbar at a shadowy figure approaching him, only to hit empty air. "This thing's messing with us," Liang Wei growled. Confronting the Fog Weaver. The Fog Weaver finally revealed itself, emerging from the mist like a living nightmare. Its form was constantly shifting, a blend of shadow and light, with glowing tendrils that reached out hungrily. Chen Hao hurled his spear, aiming for its core, but the creature dissolved into mist, reforming behind him. One of its tendrils lashed out, striking his energy shield and depleting its charge instantly. "Focus on the tendrils," Chen Hao called out, dodging another attack. Liang Wei swung his crowbar, managing to sever one of the tendrils. The Fog Weaver let out a piercing screech, its form destabilizing for a moment. Chen Hao took the opportunity to adjust the signal jammer's frequency, amplifying its disruptive effect. The creature writhed as the field grew stronger, its tendrils retracting as it tried to shield its core. "Now's our chance," Chen Hao shouted. Liang Wei charged forward, landing a brutal strike on the creature's exposed core. The Fog Weaver let out one final scream before dissolving into the fog, leaving behind a glowing artifact. Fog Weaver defeated. Survival points earned, plus 30. The Beta Key. The artifact hovered in the air, pulsing with a soft blue light. The system confirmed its identity. Beta Key acquired. Override progress, 66%. Chen Hao reached out, and as his hand touched the artifact, a surge of energy coursed through him. The map updated, marking the location of the final Gamma Key. 2 down, 1 to go, Liang Wei said, grinning despite his exhaustion. Chen Hao nodded, though his expression remained serious. The final key was in the heart of the city, a place the system labeled as a critical zone. The fog's retaliation. As they ascended back to the surface, the fog seemed more aggressive, swirling violently around them. The creatures were no longer hiding, their glowing eyes visible in every direction. The system chimed. "Warning, hostility levels increasing. Return to shelter immediately." Looks like the system's mad, Liang Wei muttered. Good, Chen Hao replied. Let it be. They sprinted through the industrial zone, fending off smaller creatures with their weapons and relying on the energy shield to block the more dangerous attacks. By the time they reached the shelter, both were covered in scratches and bruises but alive. Preparing for the final key. Back in the safety of the shelter, they placed the beta key beside the alpha key. The system hummed softly, integrating the second key's data. Override progress, 66%. Prepare for final key retrieval. Chen Hao stared at the map, his gaze fixed on the gamma key's location. One more, he said quietly. Liang Wei sat beside him, inspecting the scratches on his crowbar. And then we shut this whole thing down. The fog outside raged, but inside, the two survivors were calm, their resolve stronger than ever. The final piece of the puzzle awaited them, and they were ready to face whatever the system threw their way. Chapter 10, The Core's Revelation. The storm outside the shelter was unlike anything Chen Hao and Liang Wei had encountered before. The fog wasn't just thicker, it pulsed and churned, as if alive and aware of their progress. The air itself seemed to hum with tension. Chen Hao stared at the map, the location of the gamma key glowing ominously in the heart of the city's critical zone. Every instinct told him the final leg of this journey would change everything. You think this last key will really let us shut it all down? Liang Wei asked, sharpening his crowbar with slow, deliberate strokes. Chen Hao didn't answer immediately. His gaze lingered on the map, on the pulsating icon at the center. I don't know, he admitted. But it's our only shot. Into the critical zone. The critical zone was unlike any place they'd explored. The fog here was dense, glowing faintly with an eerie green tint. Ruined buildings towered overhead, their skeletal remains warped as if the fog had melted parts of them. The system chimed. Critical zone entered. High-risk area, hostile entities and environmental hazards present. Chen Hao tightened his grip on his spear, scanning the area as they moved. Every shadow felt alive, every sound a potential threat. As they approached the waypoint, the ground beneath their feet shifted, almost like a heartbeat. The fog parted briefly, revealing a massive structure in the distance, a towering spire that pulsed with the same green light as the fog. The gamma key's inside that thing, Chen Hao said. Of course it is, Liang Wei muttered. The spire's labyrinth. The entrance to the spire was a gaping maw of metal and fog, the interior lit by faintly glowing veins that pulsed through the walls. The system map updated, displaying a complex maze of corridors leading to the gamma key's location. Stay close, Chen Hao said, his voice barely above a whisper. They navigated the labyrinth cautiously, encountering strange mechanisms that seemed to be alive, walls that shifted, floors that vibrated, and glowing orbs that emitted bursts of energy. At one point, a series of drones emerged from the walls, their metallic bodies gleaming in the dim light. Chen Hao activated the signal jammer, causing the drones to falter just long enough for Liang Wei to smash them apart. Drones disabled. Survival points earned, +10. The gamma key. After what felt like hours, they reached a massive chamber at the center of the spire. At its heart floated the gamma key, a glowing artifact radiating a soft, golden light. Gamma key detected. Warning, Guardian active. The room trembled as a massive creature descended from the ceiling, its body a fusion of organic and mechanical components. Its multiple eyes glowed red, and its limbs bristled with weapons. New creature detected, Gamma Sentinel. Strength, extreme. Weakness, core exposure during weapon activation. Liang Wei exhaled sharply. Another one of these things? This one's bigger, Chen Hao said grimly. The Sentinel's test. The Gamma Sentinel wasted no time, firing a barrage of energy blasts that forced Chen Hao and Liang Wei to dive for cover. Its limbs moved with a terrifying precision, each strike calculated to cut off their escape routes. We need to disable its weapons. Chen Hao shouted, hurling his spear at one of the creature's limbs. The spear struck true, causing a shower of sparks. Liang Wei charged in, his crowbar smashing into the creature's leg joint. The sentinel roared, its core briefly exposed as it readjusted its stance. Now! Chen Hao yelled, throwing a jagged piece of debris at the core. The impact caused the creature to falter, its movements becoming erratic. The battle raged on, every strike and counterstrike pushing Chen Hao and Liang Wei to their limits. Finally, with one last coordinated effort, they managed to destroy the Sentinel's core. Gamma Sentinel defeated. Survival points earned, plus 50. The core's revelation. Chen Hao approached the Gamma key, his heart pounding. As he reached out to grab it, the system chimed. All override keys acquired. Proceed to Central Core. The map updated, marking the location of the core system deep beneath the spire. But before they could move, the chamber shifted, and a holographic figure appeared, a tall, humanoid shape cloaked in light. System Overseer activated. The figure's voice was calm but cold. Congratulations, Subjects 045 and 078. You have completed the first phase of the trial. Chen Hao froze. First phase? The Overseer nodded. The trial is a multi-tiered process designed to assess human adaptability and resilience. Your progress has been satisfactory. Liang Wei stepped forward, his crowbar still raised. You've been toying with us this whole time? Why? Who's behind this? The Overseer's gaze turned to Liang Wei. The trial is not a punishment, nor is it controlled by any single entity. It is a necessary process to prepare humanity for what lies beyond. What lies beyond? Chen Hao demanded, his fists clenched. The Overseer extended a hand, and the room filled with projections of stars, planets, and massive alien structures. Humanity is no longer alone, the Overseer said. The fog, the creatures, this trial, it is all preparation for an inevitable confrontation with forces beyond your comprehension. The keys you have gathered will unlock the means to fight back. A choice. The Overseer's tone shifted, becoming more urgent. You now face a choice. Proceed to the core and activate the override, ending the trial for all participants in this sector. Or, continue the trial to unlock greater potential and ensure humanity's survival against the coming threat. Liang Wei's expression hardened. This trial has killed countless people. And you want us to let it keep going? The Overseer tilted its head. Sacrifices are inevitable. The question is whether you value immediate safety over long-term survival. Chen Hao looked at the Gamma key in his hand, its glow pulsating gently. The weight of the Overseer's words pressed on him. We'll decide at the core, Chen Hao said finally, his voice firm. The Overseer nodded, its form fading. Your decision will shape the future. Choose wisely. Toward the core. The map updated once more, marking the final path to the core. Chen Hao and Liang Wei exchanged a glance, the gravity of their situation sinking in. This isn't just about us anymore, Chen Hao said. Liang Wei nodded. Then let's make sure we get it right. They stepped forward, the Gamma key lighting their way as the spire shifted and opened a path toward the unknown. Chapter 11, The Overseer's Truth. The path to the core was unlike anything Chen Hao and Liang Wei had encountered. The spire seemed alive, its walls glowing with faint veins of energy that pulsed in sync with their footsteps. The air felt charged, heavy with the promise of revelations and danger. As they descended deeper, the system chimed. Core proximity, 1.2 kilometers. Warning, unstable environment detected. Anomalies increasing. What do you think it meant by forces beyond our comprehension? Liang Wei asked, breaking the silence. Chen Hao didn't answer immediately. He gripped the Gamma key tightly, his mind racing with questions. The Overseer's words had shaken him, but the implications were even more disturbing. This fog, the creatures, even the trial itself, it's all connected to something bigger, Chen Hao said finally. But we won't know the truth until we reach the core. The anomalies. The deeper they went, the more the environment began to distort. Shadows moved against the light, walls twisted and bent as though they were alive, and strange whispers echoed around them. At one point, Liang Wei froze, his crowbar raised. Did you hear that? Chen Hao nodded, his eyes scanning the shifting shadows. The whispers grew louder, forming words they couldn't quite understand. It felt as though the spire itself was speaking to them, urging them forward but warning them at the same time. Environmental anomaly detected, temporal distortion. Suddenly, the hallway ahead of them blurred, shifting between states of ruin and pristine condition. It was as if they were seeing the spire's past and future simultaneously. "What is this place?" Liang Wei whispered, his grip tightening on his weapon. "The overseer said this was a trial," Chen Hao replied. "But maybe it's more than that." The overseer's return. As they approached the core, the overseer's holographic form appeared again, this time more detailed. Its face was featureless, but its body seemed to shimmer with fragments of data and energy. "You've made it farther than most," the overseer said, its tone calm yet tinged with something almost like approval. Chen Hao stopped, his spear pointed at the figure. "We need answers. What is this fog? What are the creatures? What's the real purpose of this trial?" The overseer inclined its head. "The trial is humanity's crucible. The fog is a biotechnological construct, designed to test your adaptability under extreme conditions. The creatures are simulations, adaptive algorithms manifesting as physical threats." Liang Wei stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "So this is all fake? Just some sick experiment?" "Not fake," the overseer corrected. "Controlled. The stakes are real, as are the consequences. This trial is necessary for your species to survive the coming invasion." "The coming invasion?" Chen Hao frowned. "Invasion? By who?" The overseer gestured, and the space around them transformed. The walls disappeared, replaced by a vast expanse of stars. In the distance, massive ships loomed, their alien forms glowing with a sinister energy. "This galaxy is not as isolated as you believe," the overseer explained. "A hostile force has already begun to consume worlds at the edge of your system. They are relentless, adaptable, and technologically superior. Without preparation, humanity will fall within decades." The projection shifted, showing Earth surrounded by the fog, creatures swarming across its surface. But this time, the humans fought back, their weapons enhanced by the same keys Chen Hao and Liang Wei had collected. "The trial is designed to create leaders," the overseer continued. "Those who can harness the override keys and unlock humanity's latent potential." A disturbing revelation. Liang Wei's face darkened. "And what happens to the people who don't survive your trial? Are they just sacrifices for your plan?" The overseer's tone remained even. "Survival always comes at a cost. Every civilization we have uplifted has faced this trial. Most succeed. Some do not. The alternative is extinction." Chen Hao's hands tightened into fists. "You keep saying we. Who are you?" The overseer paused, its form flickering. "I am a remnant of an ancient alliance, a coalition of civilizations that faced the same threat long ago. We survived, but at great cost. My purpose is to ensure that others do not repeat our mistakes." A hidden agenda. As the overseer spoke, Chen Hao's system interface flickered, displaying a new message. "Warning, overseer data inconsistent. Possible manipulation detected." Chen Hao narrowed his eyes. "You're not telling us everything, are you?" The overseer tilted its head. "What do you mean?" "The system just flagged your data," Chen Hao said. "You're hiding something." For the first time, the overseer's tone shifted, becoming almost defensive. "There are aspects of the trial you are not yet ready to understand. The information you have received is sufficient for your current task." Liang Wei raised his crowbar, pointing it at the overseer. "Enough of your half-truths. If you want us to trust you, tell us everything now." The overseer hesitated, its form flickering more violently. "Very well. But understand, the full truth may test your resolve. The core's true purpose." The projection shifted again, this time revealing a massive structure buried deep beneath the spire. "The core is not just the control center for this trial," the overseer admitted. "It is a gateway, a bridge between your world and the invading force's dimension. The fog, the creatures, even the override keys, all of it originates from the enemy's technology. Chen Hao's stomach churned. You're saying this trial uses the invaders' own technology against us? The overseer nodded. Precisely. But the process is not without risk. The core must remain active to maintain the gateway's integrity. If you shut it down, the trial will end, but humanity will lose access to the tools it needs to fight back. Liang Wei shook his head in disbelief. So, what do you want us to leave this nightmare running forever? You must decide, the overseer said. End the trial and ensure immediate safety, or continue the process and prepare humanity for the war to come. The weight of choice. Chen Hao and Liang Wei stood in silence, the enormity of their decision sinking in. We can't let this continue, Liang Wei said finally. Too many people have died already. But if we end it, we might be dooming humanity in the long run, Chen Hao countered. This trial might be the only way to survive what's coming. The overseer's form flickered again, its voice echoing around them. The choice is yours. But remember, every action has consequences. The path ahead. As they approached the core's final chamber, the overseer vanished, leaving them alone with their thoughts. Chen Hao clenched his fists, his mind racing. Whatever we decide, we need to be sure. There's no going back. Liang Wei nodded, his expression grim. Then let's finish this. The core's chamber loomed ahead, glowing with a light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The final decision awaited them, and the fate of humanity rested on their shoulder. Chapter 12, The Core Confrontation. The core chamber was a vast, circular expanse that seemed to stretch endlessly into the void. The walls shimmered with cascading lines of energy, their light pulsating in time with a deep, rhythmic hum that reverberated in Chen Hao's chest. At the center of the chamber stood the core, a massive crystalline structure suspended in a column of swirling energy, glowing with an unnatural radiance. Chen Hao and Liang Wei stopped at the threshold, both instinctively gripping their weapons tighter. This is it, Chen Hao murmured, his voice low. Liang Wei scanned the room, his eyes narrowing. It's too quiet. I don't trust it. The system chimed. Core detected. Override keys required for activation. Warning, core defense systems online. Hostile presence imminent. Chen Hao held up the three glowing override keys, the alpha, beta, and gamma keys. Together, they radiated a synchronized light, as though resonating with the core's energy. What happens when we put these in? Liang Wei asked. Chen Hao shook his head. I don't know. The overseer said we'd have a choice. But I don't trust it to tell us the whole truth. The Guardian awakens. As they stepped closer, the chamber trembled, and the rhythmic hum grew louder. Suddenly, the energy around the core coalesced, forming into a massive, humanoid figure made entirely of crackling light and shadow. Core Guardian activated. Threat level, extreme. The figure's voice boomed, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to shake the very air. Intruders. Your presence is unauthorized. State your purpose. Chen Hao raised the override keys. We're here to stop the fog, end the trial, and free humanity from this nightmare. The Guardian's form shifted, its glowing eyes narrowing. The trial is essential. Interference will result in termination. Liang Wei stepped forward, his crowbar in hand. We're not leaving until this ends, one way or another. The Guardian raised its arms, twin blades of energy materializing in its hands. Then prove your worth, challengers. The battle for control. The Guardian moved with terrifying speed, its energy blades slicing through the air in blinding arcs. Chen Hao and Liang Wei dodged and countered, their movements honed by countless battles during the trial. Focus on its core. Chen Hao shouted, hurling his spear at the Guardian's chest. The spear struck true, causing the Guardian to stagger. Liang Wei seized the moment, charging in and smashing his crowbar against the Guardian's leg. The blow caused cracks to appear in the energy construct, but the Guardian retaliated with a devastating shockwave that sent both of them flying. Health critical. Immediate action required. Chen Hao groaned, pulling himself to his feet. The Guardian loomed over him, its energy blades raised for a killing blow. At the last moment, Chen Hao activated the Gamma Key, unleashing a burst of light that blinded the Guardian and forced it back. Liang Wei used the distraction to climb onto the Guardian's back, striking at the cracks with relentless fury. The Guardian roared, its form flickering as its energy began to destabilize. "Now!" Liang Wei shouted. Chen Hao charged forward, plunging the Alpha and Beta keys into the Guardian's chest. The room erupted in a blinding explosion of light as the Guardian dissolved into a cascade of energy. Core Guardian neutralized. Override keys accepted. The final decision. As the dust settled, the core began to shift, its crystalline structure splitting open to reveal a central console. The system chimed again. All override keys inserted. Core system accessible. Choose, terminate trial or continue trial. Chen Hao and Liang Wei exchanged a glance. "This is it," Chen Hao said, stepping toward the console. The Overseer's holographic form appeared beside the core, its expressionless face watching them intently. "Your decision will shape the future of your world. Choose wisely." Liang Wei scowled. "What happens if we terminate the trial?" "The fog will dissipate," the Overseer explained. "The creatures will cease to exist, and humanity will return to its normal state. However, you will lose access to the technological advancements and abilities gained during the trial. When the invaders arrive, humanity will be unprepared." "And if we continue the trial?" Chen Hao asked. "The fog will remain, and the trial will expand to other regions, accelerating humanity's adaptation. But the cost will be significant. Many more will perish, and society as you know it will continue to collapse." Liang Wei clenched his fists. "So either we doom humanity now or doom it later?" Great choices. An unexpected revelation. As Chen Hao hesitated, the system interface flickered with a new message. Hidden protocol detected. Accessing Overseer data. Suddenly, the Overseer's form glitched violently, its calm demeanor replaced by a frantic, distorted voice. "What are you doing? Stop, this information is restricted." The core console lit up, displaying a series of files labeled Origin Protocols. Chen Hao accessed the files, his eyes widening as the truth unfolded before him. The Overseer wasn't just a remnant of an ancient alliance, it was part of the invading force itself. The trial wasn't designed to help humanity, it was a tool to weaken it, to strip away the weak and create chaos, leaving only a fragmented, desperate population for the invaders to conquer. "The Overseer lied," Chen Hao said, his voice trembling with anger. Liang Wei slammed his crowbar into the ground. "I knew it. This whole thing has been a setup from the start." The Overseer's form stabilized, its tone now cold and emotionless. "You misunderstand. The trial is necessary. Humanity must evolve, or it will perish. A new option." The system chimed again, displaying a third option on the console. Override trial and seal the core. Chen Hao read the description aloud. Sealing the core will destroy the trial system and sever the connection to the invader's dimension. The fog and creatures will vanish, but humanity will retain its technological advancements and abilities. However, the process will destabilize the core, and the consequences are unknown. Liang Wei nodded. "Sounds like our best shot. What do you think?" Chen Hao hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He glanced at the Overseer, its holographic form flickering ominously. "If we do this, there's no turning back," Chen Hao said. Liang Wei grinned, gripping his crowbar. "There never was." The seal. Chen Hao selected the third option, inserting the Gamma Key into the final slot. The core began to glow brighter, its energy spiraling into a vortex of light and sound. The Overseer let out a distorted scream, its form disintegrating as the core's power surged. "Core destabilization imminent," the system warned. "Evacuate immediately." Chen Hao and Liang Wei ran as the chamber began to collapse, the walls crumbling around them. The fog outside the spire began to dissipate, and the creatures disintegrated into ash. As they reached the surface, a massive explosion erupted behind them, the spire collapsing into itself as the core sealed the connection to the invader's dimension. A new dawn. When the dust settled, the city was silent. The fog was gone, the creatures eradicated. The air felt clean for the first time in weeks. Chen Hao looked at Liang Wei, both of them battered but alive. "We did it," he said, a small smile breaking through the exhaustion. Liang Wei nodded. "Yeah. But something tells me this isn't over." In the distance, the horizon shimmered faintly, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The trial was over, but the fight for humanity's future had just begun. Chapter 13, Aftermath and Rebuilding. The city, once cloaked in the oppressive fog, now stood eerily silent. The streets were littered with the remnants of the battle, abandoned weapons, shattered buildings, and the ashen remains of the creatures that had terrorized humanity for weeks. Yet, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the sun shone through the clouds, bathing the ruins in a warm, golden light. Chen Hao and Liang Wei stood at the edge of the spire's crater, the ground beneath them still warm from the explosion. The collapsed structure had left a massive void, its remnants crackling faintly with residual energy. "We really did it," Liang Wei said, his voice filled with a mix of disbelief and relief. Chen Hao nodded, but his expression remained somber. "We stopped the trial, but the overseer said the invaders are still coming." This was just the beginning. Humanity's state. Over the next few days, Chen Hao and Liang Wei traveled through the city, helping survivors and assessing the damage. Many were disoriented, their memories of the fog and creatures hazy. Others, like Chen Hao, retained clear recollections of the horrors they'd faced. "We need to organize," Chen Hao said as they gathered a small group of survivors in a makeshift shelter. "The fog is gone, but the invaders are still out there. If we don't prepare, we'll be caught off guard when they come." Among the survivors was Dr. Lu Mei, a former scientist who had been studying the fog before the trial began. She stepped forward, her expression determined. "I've seen what the fog did to our people and our world. If there's even a chance we can use what's left of the trial's technology to defend ourselves, we have to try." Chen Hao agreed. "We need to study the keys, the spire's remnants, everything." The overseer said the trial was connected to the invaders. "There's a chance we can turn their own technology against them." Rediscovering the override keys. The override keys, now inert, still emitted faint traces of energy. Dr. Lu Mei took them to her temporary lab, a repurposed facility on the outskirts of the city. "These keys are unlike anything we've ever seen," she explained, holding the alpha key under a microscope. "Their energy signature is alien, but there's something familiar about it too. It's almost as if they were designed to adapt to human physiology." Liang Wei leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. "Can we use them again?" "Possibly," Dr. Lu Mei said. "But it will take time to understand how they work. For now, they might still hold some of the abilities you unlocked during the trial." Chen Hao clenched his fist, feeling a faint surge of energy course through him. The trial had changed him, enhanced him. And he wasn't the only one. Uniting the survivors. As days turned into weeks, Chen Hao and Liang Wei worked tirelessly to unite the scattered survivors. The world beyond their city was still a mystery, communication networks had been disrupted, and travel was dangerous. But they couldn't afford to wait. Liang Wei took charge of training those who had fought during the trial. "If you survive this long, you've got what it takes to protect others," he told them. "We're going to need every fighter we can get when the invaders arrive." Meanwhile, Chen Hao focused on leadership, rallying people around the hope of rebuilding and resisting the coming threat. "We've been through hell," he said during one gathering. "But we're still here. And as long as we stand together, we have a chance." A new threat emerges. One evening, as Chen Hao and Liang Wei patrolled the outskirts of the city, the system interface flickered to life unexpectedly. Alert, anomalous activity detected. Location, Sector 7. "What now?" Liang Wei muttered, tightening his grip on his crowbar. They followed the system's guidance to a desolate area near the spire's remains. There, they found a small, glowing rift hovering above the ground, pulsating with the same energy as the core. "What is that?" Liang Wei asked, stepping back cautiously. Chen Hao stared at the rift, his mind racing. It looks like a gateway, like the core was keeping these things contained, and now they're starting to leak through. Suddenly, the rift pulsed violently, and a creature emerged, a sleek, insect-like being with glowing eyes and razor-sharp limbs. It was smaller than the creatures from the fog but moved with terrifying speed. New threat detected, rift-born entity. The creature lunged at them, but Chen Hao reacted instinctively, summoning the energy from the beta key. A shield of light formed around him, deflecting the attack. Liang Wei moved in, smashing the creature with his crowbar. As the creature disintegrated, the rift began to stabilize, its glow dimming. But Chen Hao knew this was only the beginning. The invader's signal. Dr. Lu Mei examined the rift site the next day, her face pale as she reviewed the data. This isn't just a random event, she said. These rifts are signals, probes sent by the invaders to scout our world. Chen Hao frowned. So they know we're here. How long do we have before they send more? Dr. Lu Mei shook her head. It's impossible to say. But if we can study these rifts and understand how they work, we might be able to turn them into weapons or even close them permanently. Liang Wei sighed. Great. More homework for us. Preparing for the future. Over the next few weeks, the survivors worked tirelessly to fortify their city. Watchtowers were built, supply lines established, and teams trained to respond to rift activity. Chen Hao and Liang Wei continued to lead the charge, their bond growing stronger with each challenge they faced. We've come a long way, Liang Wei said one evening as they looked out over the city. But do you really think we can win this? Chen Hao didn't answer immediately. He stared at the horizon, where faint traces of energy shimmered in the distance, evidence of more rifts forming. We don't have a choice, he said finally. We've fought this far. We'll fight until the end. A glimpse of hope. One day, while studying the override keys, Dr. Lu Mei made a breakthrough. These keys aren't just tools, she explained to Chen Hao and Liang Wei. They're a blueprint. If we can unlock their full potential, we might be able to replicate their technology and use it to fight back. Chen Hao's eyes lit up. You mean we can create our own weapons? Not just weapons, Dr. Lu Mei said. Defense systems, energy sources, even enhancements for our people. The invaders might be stronger, but we can level the playing field. Liang Wei grinned. Now we're talking. The journey ahead. As the city prepared for the next phase of their fight, Chen Hao stood on the spire's ruins, gazing at the stars. Somewhere out there, the invaders were watching, waiting. But for the first time, Chen Hao felt something he hadn't felt since the fog first descended: hope. We're not just survivors, he said to himself. We're fighters. And we're going to show them what humanity is capable of. The battle wasn't over. But humanity was ready to fight back. Chapter 14, The First Counterattack. The air buzzed with anticipation as Chen Hao addressed the gathered crowd of survivors. They stood in the heart of the fortified city, a makeshift stage hastily assembled in what used to be a bustling square. Men, women, and even children stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces marked by exhaustion but also determination. Today marks a turning point, Chen Hao began, his voice strong and steady. The invaders have shown us their hand, but they don't understand one thing: humanity doesn't break. We adapt, we fight, and we win. The crowd erupted into cheers, a wave of unity washing over them. Chen Hao raised his hand, calling for silence. With the help of Dr. Lu Mei, we've made progress. The override keys are the first step, but they're not the last. We've identified the rift patterns, and we know where the next one will appear. This time, we're not waiting for them to attack. We're taking the fight to them. Preparing the assault. Dr. Lu Mei stood beside a table laden with equipment, modified weapons, portable energy shields, and small devices emitting a faint blue glow. These are rift stabilizers, she explained to the gathered fighters. When placed near a rift, they can disrupt its energy flow, temporarily sealing it. But there's a catch: they take time to activate, and they draw a lot of attention. Whoever sets them up will need to defend them until the process is complete. Liang Wei smirked, tapping his crowbar against his palm. Sounds like my kind of job. Chen Hao nodded. We'll need teams to cover every angle. Liang Wei, you'll lead the ground defense. I'll handle the front lines. Dr. Lu Mei, can you coordinate from the base? She hesitated, then nodded. I'll monitor the rift's activity and provide support. But you'll only have one chance. If the stabilizers fail, the rift could destabilize further and bring more creatures through. Understood, Chen Hao said. He turned to the fighters. Gear up. We move at dawn. The rift site. The rift was located in the remains of an industrial district, its pulsing light casting eerie shadows over the ruins. The ground around it was scorched, and faint whispers filled the air, as if the rift itself was alive. Chen Hao's team arrived in silence, spreading out to secure the area. Liang Wei directed the fighters into defensive positions, their modified weapons at the ready. Rift stabilizers deployed, Dr. Lu Mei's voice crackled through their communication devices. Activation sequence starting now. You've got 3 minutes. As the first stabilizer began to hum, the rift pulsed violently, and creatures began to emerge, sleek, insect-like entities with glowing eyes and razor-sharp limbs. Here they come! Liang Wei shouted, swinging his crowbar to intercept the first creature. The battle begins. The creatures swarmed the fighters, their movements fast and erratic. Chen Hao moved through the chaos like a force of nature, his enhanced reflexes and strength allowing him to take down the creatures with precision strikes. One of the fighters screamed as a creature lunged at her, but Liang Wei was there in an instant, crushing it with a single blow. Stick together, he barked. Don't let them separate you. Dr. Lu Mei's voice came through the comms. Stabilizer 1 is holding, but Stabilizer 2 is under heavy strain. Chen Hao, can you reach it? I'm on it, he replied, sprinting toward the device. He arrived just in time to see a larger creature, a hulking, armored beast, bearing down on the stabilizer. Chen Hao threw his spear, the weapon piercing the creature's carapace. It roared in pain but continued its charge. With no time to retrieve his weapon, Chen Hao activated the Beta Key's energy shield, using it to block the creature's attack. Liang Wei. I need backup, he shouted. Liang Wei appeared moments later, climbing onto the beast's back and striking at its vulnerable joints. Together, they brought the creature down, buying the stabilizer enough time to complete its sequence. A new challenge. As the second stabilizer activated, the rift's energy began to waver. But instead of closing, it expanded, and a new figure stepped through. The creature was humanoid, clad in sleek, black armor that shimmered with an otherworldly glow. It carried a weapon that looked like a hybrid of a blade and a gun, and its movements were unnervingly precise. Threat level, elite entity detected. Chen Hao and Liang Wei exchanged a glance. Well, this is new, Liang Wei muttered. The elite entity raised its weapon, firing a burst of energy that narrowly missed Chen Hao. He retaliated with a flurry of attacks, but the entity dodged with inhuman agility, countering with strikes that forced Chen Hao to stay on the defensive. Liang Wei, get the stabilizers working! Chen Hao shouted, dodging another attack. I'm on it! Liang Wei replied, leading a group of fighters to the final device. Turning the tide. The fight against the elite entity pushed Chen Hao to his limits. Every move it made was calculated, every attack precise. But Chen Hao had something the creature didn't, the support of his team. Liang Wei and the fighters worked tirelessly to defend the final stabilizer, holding off the swarm of lesser creatures. Dr. Lu Mei's voice crackled through the comms. Final stabilizer at 90%. Hold on. Chen Hao sought his opening, a split-second distraction as the elite entity glanced toward the rift. He summoned the energy from the Gamma Key, unleashing a burst of light that temporarily blinded the creature. With all his strength, he lunged forward, driving his spear into its chest. The elite entity staggered, its armor cracking as it let out an otherworldly scream. It collapsed, its body disintegrating into the same ash as the lesser creatures. Stabilizers at 100%. Rift closing now. Dr. Lu Mei announced. The rift pulsed one final time before collapsing in on itself, leaving only silence in its wake. A hard-won victory.
As the dust settled, the fighters regrouped, their exhaustion evident but their spirits high.
"We did it," Liang Wei said, clapping Chen Hao on the shoulder. "For now," Chen Hao replied, his eyes scanning the horizon. But this was just a scout.
The real fight is still ahead.
Dr. Lu Mei arrived on the scene, her expression a mix of relief and concern.
The data we gathered from this rift is invaluable. But it also confirms our fears: the invaders are escalating.
We need to prepare for larger incursions.
Chen Hao nodded. Then we keep fighting. We've shown them that humanity won't go down without a fight. Now, we take the fight to them. Chapter 15, Humanity Strikes Back.
The city's air was filled with a palpable sense of purpose. For the first time since the fog descended and the trials began, the survivors were not simply reacting to their enemies, they were preparing to go on the offensive. Chen Hao stood in the command center, a hastily converted underground facility that served as the nerve center for their resistance. Around him, monitors flickered with real-time data from Dr. Lu Mei's scans. Maps of the surrounding regions were pinned to the walls, dotted with markers indicating potential rift activity.
"Here's the plan," Dr. Lu Mei began, gesturing to the largest map.
"The data we collected from the last rift has allowed us to triangulate the locations of several others. Most of them are inactive for now, but this one," she pointed to a marker near an abandoned military base, "shows signs of imminent activity. If we can deploy stabilizers before it fully forms, we might be able to shut it down before anything comes through." Liang Wei leaned against the wall, his arms crossed.
"And if something does come through?"
"Then we do what we did last time," Chen Hao said firmly.
"Only faster and cleaner."
The journey to the base. The team set out at dawn. Their convoy of armored vehicles moved cautiously through the city's outskirts, navigating roads cracked and broken by weeks of chaos. The survivors had done their best to clear debris and fortify key areas, but the scars of the trial were everywhere: burnt-out buildings, toppled skyscrapers, and streets that had become makeshift graveyards.
Liang Wei rode in the lead vehicle, scanning the horizon through binoculars.
"This area used to be crawling with those things," he remarked.
"Feels too quiet now."
Chen Hao, seated beside him, tightened his grip on his spear.
"Quiet means we're either lucky or walking into a trap. Stay sharp."
As they approached the military base, the air grew heavy with an unnatural energy. The rift's location was marked by a faint, shimmering distortion in the sky, visible even in daylight. "There it is," Dr. Lu Mei's voice crackled through the radio.
"You've got less than an hour before it stabilizes. Deploy the stabilizers now." Securing the perimeter. The team moved quickly, setting up the stabilizers in a triangular formation around the rift site.
Each device hummed softly as it powered up, emitting faint blue light.
"Defensive positions." Liang Wei barked, directing fighters to cover key points. "No one gets through."
As they worked, the distortion in the sky grew brighter, and a low, droning sound filled the air.
Chen Hao activated the interface on his arm, scanning the rift. "It's accelerating. We're not alone."
The ground trembled, and cracks began to form around the rift. From the fissures emerged creatures smaller than the ones they'd faced before but faster and more numerous.
"Hold the line!" Chen Hao shouted, charging into the fray. The rift opens. Despite their best efforts, the rift stabilized faster than anticipated.
A massive pulse of energy knocked several fighters off their feet, and a new wave of creatures emerged, larger, more heavily armored, and accompanied by another elite entity. This one was different from the last. Its armor was sleeker, its movements more deliberate, and its weapon crackled with a red, unstable energy. "Target the stabilizers," it commanded, its voice cold and mechanical.
Chen Hao's eyes widened. "It can talk?" Liang Wei grinned grimly. "Great. Now they're giving orders."
The elite entity moved with terrifying speed, closing the distance to the nearest stabilizer in seconds. Chen Hao intercepted it, blocking its strike with his energy shield. "You're not getting through," he growled, pushing back against the creature's strength. "You cannot stop the inevitable," the elite replied, its weapon glowing brighter. "This world will fall, as countless others have before it." A desperate fight. The battle raged on, the fighters struggling to hold their ground against the relentless waves of creatures.
Liang Wei fought like a man possessed, his crowbar smashing through chitin and armor alike. Chen Hao, we need more time.
Dr. Lu Mei's voice came through the comms. The stabilizers are at 75%, but they're taking too much damage. Chen Hao gritted his teeth, dodging a strike from the elite entity and countering with a blast of energy from the gamma key.
Liang Wei, cover the stabilizers. I'll handle this one. Liang Wei nodded, rallying the fighters around him.
You heard the man. Don't let those things near the devices. As Liang Wei and the others held the line, Chen Hao faced the elite entity one-on-one. Their clash was a blur of movement and energy, each strike creating shockwaves that shook the ground.
Unlocking the key's true power.
As the fight dragged on, Chen Hao felt the energy of the keys surging within him. He realized that the keys were responding to his will, growing stronger with each moment of focus. Is this what the overseer meant, he thought, recalling the enigmatic being's words about the key's potential. The elite entity lunged, its weapon aimed at Chen Hao's chest. In that moment, Chen Hao activated the Alpha Key, creating a barrier of pure energy that deflected the attack. The elite staggered, its armor cracking from the force.
Impossible. You cannot wield such power. Chen Hao smirked. Watch me.
Channeling the combined energy of the Alpha, Beta, and Gamma keys, he unleashed a devastating attack, a beam of light that pierced through the elite entity and struck the rift itself. The rift collapses. The rift began to collapse, its energy imploding in on itself. The remaining creatures disintegrated, their forms unable to withstand the destabilization.
Stabilizers at 100%. The rift is closing. Dr. Lu Mei announced.
Chen Hao staggered back, his body drained from the effort. Liang Wei caught him, a wide grin on his face.
You really know how to make a scene, don't you?
Chen Hao chuckled weakly.
Just doing my job. A new ally.
As the dust settled, a figure emerged from the shadows, a human, clad in strange, advanced armor that bore no resemblance to the invaders' technology.
Who are you? Chen Hao demanded, raising his spear.
The figure removed their helmet, revealing a woman with piercing blue eyes and a scar running across her cheek.
My name is Captain Lin Yu, she said. I've been fighting these things for years. And if you want to win, you'll need my help. Chapter 16, An Unlikely Ally.
Chen Hao stared at Captain Lin Yu, his exhaustion temporarily forgotten. The woman's advanced armor and confident demeanor marked her as someone who had seen countless battles.
Her presence, so sudden and unexpected, raised more questions than answers. Years? Chen Hao repeated, stepping forward. How could you have been fighting them for years? The trials only started a month ago.
Lin Yu smiled faintly, her eyes scanning the survivors around her.
For you, maybe. For me, it's been much longer. I came through a rift like this one, but not as an invader. I escaped. Her words hung in the air, the implications sinking in. Escaped from where?
Dr. Lu Mei asked, stepping closer.
From their homeworld, Lin Yu said grimly. Or what's left of it.
The invaders, what you've been calling the overseers, have conquered countless planets, bending their inhabitants to their will. Those who resist are either destroyed or turned into what you've been fighting. The crowd murmured in disbelief, but Chen Hao silenced them with a raised hand.
If what you're saying is true, then you know more about them than we do. Why are they here? What do they want?
They want what they always want, Lin Yu said. Resources, territory, and bodies to add to their ranks. Earth is just the latest target in a long line of conquests.
But your world is different. How so?
Lin Yu gestured to the keys on Chen Hao's arm.
Those. They've never encountered anything like them before.
The overseers might not admit it, but they're afraid of what you might become if you unlock their full potential.
The meeting.
Back at the fortified city, the core group gathered in the command center. Lin Yu stood at the center of the room, her presence commanding attention. The overseers are methodical, she began, pulling up a holographic map from her armor.
They send scouts first, small incursions to test a planet's defenses. Then come the harvesting teams, targeting population centers and infrastructure. Finally, the overseers themselves arrive to finish the job. Based on what I've seen, you're between the second and third phases. Dr. Lu Mei frowned. So we still have time to prepare. Not much, Lin Yu said. The rift you just closed wasn't random. It was a beacon, signaling to their fleet that this planet is worth their attention. They'll be here within weeks, maybe less. Chen Hao leaned forward. Then we need to hit them before they hit us. Can we take the fight to their side of the rift? Lin Yu nodded. It's possible, but it's a suicide mission unless you know what you're doing. Their world is a fortress, and the air itself is toxic to humans who aren't prepared. We'll prepare, Chen Hao said firmly. But we need your help. You've been there. You know how they operate. Lin Yu hesitated, her eyes meeting Chen Hao's. If we do this, there's no turning back. The overseers won't just target you, they'll wipe out anyone who stands with you. Chen Hao didn't flinch. Then we make sure they don't get the chance. Training and strategy. Over the next few days, Lin Yu worked tirelessly to prepare the survivors for what lay ahead. She introduced new tactics, combining their existing technology with techniques she had learned in her years of fighting the overseers. Under her guidance, Dr. Lu Mei began modifying the stabilizers, turning them into portable weapons capable of destabilizing rifts on the other side. Liang Wei led the fighters in grueling training sessions, learning to anticipate the invaders' movements and exploit their weaknesses. But it was Chen Hao who bore the brunt of the preparation. Lin Yu pushed him harder than anyone, testing the limits of his strength and the key's power. You're the only one who can wield these, she said during one of their training sessions. If you can't master them, this war is already lost. Chen Hao gritted his teeth, focusing on the glowing keys. Over the past weeks, he had unlocked 3 of them, each granting him new abilities. But Lin Yu insisted that there was more power hidden within the keys that he had yet to tap into. Stop thinking of them as tools, she said. They're part of you now. Let them guide you. The final rift. Their chance to strike came sooner than expected. Dr. Lu Mei detected a massive surge of energy near the coast, an active rift larger than any they had encountered before. This isn't just a scout mission, she said, her face pale. They're sending an invasion force. Then we hit them before they're ready, Chen Hao said. Lin Yu, can you get us through the rift? She nodded. I can. But once we're there, it's up to you to lead. The overseers won't expect a counterattack. If we're fast, we can disrupt their operations and buy Earth some time. Chen Hao turned to the fighters. This is it. If you're not ready to give everything, stay behind. No one will blame you. Not a single person stepped back. Into the unknown. The rift loomed before them, a swirling vortex of energy that seemed to pull at their very souls. Chen Hao stood at the front of the group, his spear in hand and the keys glowing brightly on his arm. Remember the plan, Lin Yu said, her voice steady. We get in, plant the modified stabilizers, and get out. Stick together, and don't engage unless absolutely necessary. With a deep breath, Chen Hao stepped into the rift. The transition was disorienting, a rush of light and sound that left them reeling. When the world stabilized, they found themselves in a desolate wasteland, the air thick with an oppressive energy. This is their world, Lin Yu said, her voice tinged with bitterness. Welcome to the Overseer's domain. The landscape was dominated by towering spires of black metal, connected by streams of glowing red energy. In the distance, massive machines moved like sentinels, their every step shaking the ground. Move quickly, Lin Yu urged. They'll know we're here soon. A glimpse of the Overseers. As they moved through the wasteland, the group encountered the Overseers' forces, rows of humanoid drones patrolling the spires, their movements synchronized and mechanical. They're watching, Lin Yu said. But they won't attack unless we get too close. Their arrogance is our greatest weapon. They reached the first target, a massive rift generator pulsing with energy. Dr. Lu Mei and her team worked quickly to deploy the stabilizers, But the overseers were not as complacent as Lin Yu had hoped.
An alarm sounded, and the drones began converging on their position.
Defensive positions, Chen Hao shouted, readying his spear.
As the fighters formed a perimeter, Chen Hao felt the keys resonate within him. He knew that this was only the beginning of a battle that would decide the fate of two worlds.
Chapter 17, A World Under Siege.
The moment the alarm rang through the overseer's domain, the air grew heavier, thick with tension and the promise of violence. Chen Hao felt the weight of the oppressive atmosphere, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand.
Hold the line, he shouted, his voice cutting through the rising chaos. Dr. Liu, how much longer do you need?
2 minutes, she called back, her fingers flying across the modified stabilizer's interface. Make it 1, Lin Yu growled, her eyes scanning the horizon.
We've got company. From the towering spires, drones began to descend, sleek, humanoid machines with glowing red eyes and limbs that moved unnaturally fast. Behind them, larger, more heavily armored overseer constructs began to emerge, their forms bristling with weaponry. Chen Hao raised his spear, the keys on his arm flaring to life. The energy coursing through him felt more potent here, as though the overseer's world amplified their power. He didn't question it. Liang Wei. Take the left flank. Liang Wei nodded, rallying a group of fighters. Let's show these tin cans what we're made of. A fierce defense.
The first wave of drones was fast but fragile.
Chen Hao's spear struck true, shattering their metallic forms with each thrust.
Beside him, Lin Yu fought with precision, her advanced armor granting her speed and agility that matched the overseer's machines.
Stay together, she shouted, her voice carrying over the din of battle. They'll try to isolate us. Liang Wei's crowbar swung in wide arcs, smashing through the lighter drones with raw force. How are we supposed to hold them off when they just keep coming? We're not. Lin Yu snapped. We're buying time. Focus on surviving. The larger constructs arrived moments later, their weaponized limbs unleashing barrages of energy blasts.
Chen Hao raised his energy shield, deflecting a volley that would have decimated the fighters behind him.
Dr. Liu, he called out, sweat dripping down his face. Status.
Almost there, she replied, her voice strained.
The stabilizers are syncing with the rift's energy. Just a little longer. The keys awaken.
As the battle raged, Chen Hao felt the keys resonate more intensely. The alpha, beta, and gamma keys pulsed in unison, their energies intertwining in a way he had never experienced before. Chen Hao, Lin Yu said sharply, noticing the change.
What's happening to you?
I don't know, he admitted, gripping his spear tightly.
But I think the keys are trying to tell me something.
A sudden surge of energy coursed through him, and his vision blurred. He saw flashes of images, distant worlds consumed by the overseers, civilizations reduced to ashes, and a figure shrouded in light standing defiantly against the darkness.
Focus, Chen Hao.
Lin Yu's voice broke through the vision, grounding him. When his sight cleared, the keys had changed. Their glow was brighter, more stable, and Chen Hao felt a new ability coursing through him. Without hesitation, he thrust his spear into the ground, creating a shockwave of energy that disintegrated the drones closest to him.
New trick? Liang Wei shouted, grinning despite the chaos.
Something like that, Chen Hao replied, a newfound confidence in his voice. The overseers respond.
As the stabilizers reached full synchronization, a new threat emerged.
The ground trembled, and from the largest spire came an overseer unlike any they had faced before. It was massive, its form a fusion of organic and mechanical elements.
Its four arms ended in weapons that crackled with unstable energy, and its single eye glowed with a malevolent intelligence. A high overseer, Lin Yu said, her face pale. We're out of time. We have to move.
But the stabilizers, Dr. Liu Mei began, but Lin Yu cut her off.
They're ready. Detonate them remotely. We can't stay here. The High Overseer's voice boomed across the battlefield, deep and resonant. You dare to defy the architects of order? Your resistance is futile.
Chen Hao stepped forward, his spear crackling with energy.
We've heard that before. Let's see how you handle someone who fights back. A desperate stand. The High Overseer moved with surprising speed, its forearms striking out in coordinated attacks.
Chen Hao met its blows head-on, his enhanced strength and the key's power allowing him to hold his ground.
Lin Yu and Liang Wei joined the fight, flanking the High Overseer in targeting its joints.
Despite their combined efforts, the creature seemed impervious, its armor absorbing their attacks.
"This thing's too strong," Liang Wei shouted, dodging a swing that left a deep gouge in the ground. "Keep it distracted," Dr. Lu Mei called out.
"I need 30 seconds to trigger the stabilizers."
Chen Hao gritted his teeth, pushing the High Overseer back with a powerful strike. "We don't have 30 seconds.
The Overseer raised one of its arms, aiming a cannon directly at the stabilizers.
"No, you don't," Lin Yu shouted, leaping onto its back and jamming a blade into the joint.
The arm twitched, the shot going wide and hitting a nearby spire instead.
"The stabilizers activate." "Done," Dr. Lu Mei shouted. "Get out of there."
The stabilizers emitted a high-pitched whine, their energy building to critical levels. The High Overseer seemed to realize what was happening and turned its attention to the devices.
"Not today,"
Chen Hao roared, activating the key's new power.
A dome of shimmering energy surrounded the stabilizers, blocking the Overseer's advance.
The devices exploded in a brilliant flash of light, sending a shockwave through the rift.
The Overseer screamed, its form destabilizing as the rift began to collapse. "Everyone, fall back," Lin Yu shouted, dragging a wounded fighter toward the evacuation point. Chen Hao lingered, his eyes locked on the Overseer as it disintegrated. "This isn't over," he muttered before turning and running. A narrow escape.
The group barely made it through the rift before it collapsed entirely. Back in their world, they fell to the ground, exhausted but alive. Chen Hao looked around at the survivors, his chest heaving.
"We did it."
"For now," Lin Yu said, her tone cautious. "But this was just the beginning. The Overseers won't take this loss lightly." Dr. Lu Mei stepped forward, her expression a mix of relief and concern. "We've bought ourselves some time.
But we need to prepare for what comes next."
Chen Hao nodded, his resolve hardening.
"Then we get ready. No matter what they throw at us, we'll be ready." Chapter 18, Aftermath and Reckoning.
The survivors limped back into their base, every step a reminder of the grueling battle they had barely survived. The rift had collapsed, the stabilizers successfully disrupting the Overseer's immediate operations, but the cost of the mission weighed heavily on everyone. Chen Hao looked around at his team as they filed into the command center. Lin Yu was inspecting her armor, patches of it scorched and dented.
Liang Wei was helping another fighter, his normally jovial face drawn with exhaustion.
Dr. Lu Mei was already at her workstation, running scans and monitoring the energy fluctuations left in the rift's wake. "Casualty report," Chen Hao said quietly, his voice heavy.
Liang Wei answered, his tone uncharacteristically somber. "We lost 8. 3 more are critical. The rest of US will recover, but it's gonna take time."
Chen Hao clenched his fists, guilt washing over him. "We'll make it worth their sacrifice."
"This isn't over."
Lin Yu stepped forward, placing a firm hand on his shoulder.
"It's never over, Chen Hao. Not in a war like this. You did what you had to do. You brought them back. That's more than most can say."
A message from the Overseers. Just as the group began to regroup, an alarm blared throughout the base.
Dr. Lu Mei's console lit up with an incoming signal.
"It's not a rift," she said, her brow furrowed as she worked to decode the message.
"It's a transmission. From the Overseers." The room went silent as a holographic image flickered to life.
It was the visage of a High Overseer, though this one was far more elaborate, its form radiating a regal and imposing presence.
"Defiers of order," the Overseer's voice boomed, its tone dripping with disdain.
"You have meddled in affairs beyond your comprehension.
Your resistance is futile, but your defiance has earned our notice.
Surrender now, and you may yet be spared annihilation."
The transmission ended as abruptly as it began, leaving the room in stunned silence.
"Spared?" Liang Wei scoffed, breaking the tension. I didn't realize annihilation came with terms and conditions. They're trying to rattle us, Linyu said, crossing her arms.
It means we hurt them. Badly.
Chen Hao stepped forward, his voice steady.
We don't surrender. We fight. But we need more than just brute force. We need answers. The origin of the keys.
The next day, Chen Hao called a meeting in the command center. Lin Yu, Dr. Lu Mei, Liang Wei, and the other senior fighters gathered around the table.
The overseers didn't expect us to fight back, Chen Hao began. But their message proves one thing: they know something about the keys that we don't.
If we're going to stand a chance, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Dr. Lu Mei nodded, pulling up a hologram of the key's energy signatures.
I've been analyzing the keys ever since we found them.
They're not just tools, they're part of a larger system, something ancient and far beyond overseer technology. My theory is that the keys were created as a countermeasure against beings like the overseers.
Created by who? Liang Wei asked. Dr. Lu Mei hesitated. I don't know. But the energy signatures don't match anything on Earth. Whoever made these, they weren't human.
Lin Yu leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. If the keys were made to fight the overseers, then there's a chance their creators left behind more than just these fragments.
Weapons, knowledge, maybe even allies. Chen Hao's eyes lit up. Then we find them.
If the overseers are afraid of what we might become, we make their worst fear a reality.
The hunt for knowledge. The first step in their search took them to the remains of the collapsed rift.
Though the stabilizers had done their job, residual energy still lingered, creating strange distortions in the air. Dr. Lu Mei led the team, her portable scanner beeping intermittently as she traced the energy patterns. There's something here, she said, kneeling to inspect a patch of scorched ground.
What is it? Chen Hao asked, standing guard nearby.
A signal, she replied, her voice tinged with excitement.
It's faint, but it's not overseer technology. If I can amplify it, we might be able to trace it to its source. Lin Yu frowned. Or it could be a trap.
It's a risk we have to take, Chen Hao said.
Dr. Lu, do it.
She nodded, setting up a small array of devices.
As the signal amplified, a series of symbols appeared in the air, glowing faintly with a golden light.
What the hell is that?
Liang Wei asked, staring at the symbols.
It's a message, Dr. Lu Mei said, her eyes wide.
But it's not in any language I recognize.
Chen Hao stepped closer, the keys on his arm beginning to resonate.
The symbols shifted, rearranging themselves into something he could understand.
It's a location, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. A place where the creators of the keys once stood.
A race against time.
The team wasted no time preparing for the journey. The location was deep in the mountains, far from any known overseer activity, but the terrain was treacherous and would take days to navigate. We don't have much time, Lin Yu said as they packed their gear.
The overseers won't sit idle after that transmission.
They'll come after us, and they'll bring everything they have. That's why we need to move fast, Chen Hao said.
Whatever's waiting for us out there, it's our best chance to turn the tide.
As the group set out, Chen Hao couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The keys pulsed intermittently, their glow faint but persistent, as though they were guiding him towards something or someone.
The ruins. After days of travel, the group finally reached their destination, a sprawling ruin hidden deep within a valley.
The structures were ancient, their architecture unlike anything on Earth. Massive pillars etched with intricate carvings stood in stark contrast to the overgrown vegetation that had reclaimed much of the area. This place feels alive, Liang Wei said, his voice hushed. Dr. Lu Mei's scanner beeped wildly. The energy here is off the charts. It's the same signature as the keys, but amplified 100-fold. Chen Hao stepped forward, his hand brushing against one of the carvings. The keys on his arm flared to life, and the ruins responded, glowing softly as if awakening from a long slumber. A deep, resonant voice echoed through the valley. Bearer of the keys, you have come at last. The group froze, their weapons at the ready. From the largest structure, a figure emerged, tall, humanoid, and cloaked in shimmering light.
Who are you?
Chen Hao demanded, his spear raised.
I am a sentinel, the figure replied, its voice calm and measured. A guardian of the Keymaker's legacy. And you, Chen Hao, are their chosen heir. Chapter 19, The Sentinel's Revelation. The sentinel stepped forward, its form radiating an aura of calm authority.
Though its appearance was humanoid, its translucent body shimmered with streaks of gold and silver, giving the impression of something both ancient and otherworldly. The group instinctively tightened their grip on their weapons, but Chen Hao raised a hand, signaling them to hold their ground.
You said I'm their chosen heir, Chen Hao began, his voice steady but cautious. Who were the Keymakers, and why did they create these?
He gestured to the glowing keys on his arm.
The sentinel inclined its head.
The Keymakers were a civilization that existed long before your time, a race of unparalleled ingenuity and wisdom. They foresaw the rise of the Overseers, beings born not of chaos, but of an obsession with control. The Overseers sought to impose their will upon all existence, extinguishing free thought and individuality. Dr. Lu Mei stepped closer, her curiosity overcoming her apprehension.
And the keys? What role do they play in all of this?
They are fragments of the Keymaker's greatest creation, the Sentinel explained.
A weapon designed not to destroy, but to disrupt the Overseer's control. Each key represents a unique aspect of resistance, adaptability, unity, and defiance.
Combined, they form the Nexus, a force capable of breaking the Overseer's hold on any world.
Lin Yu frowned. If this Nexus is so powerful, why haven't we heard of it until now? Why did the Keymakers disappear?
The Sentinel's expression darkened. The Overseers learned of the Nexus and launched a preemptive strike. They wiped out the Keymakers before the weapon could be completed. The keys you bear are all that remain of their legacy. A test of worth. Chen Hao processed the Sentinel's words, the weight of his responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders.
If I'm the heir to this legacy, what am I supposed to do? How can I complete what the Keymakers started?
The Sentinel extended a hand, and the air around them shimmered. A circular platform materialized, glowing faintly. Step forward, bearer of the keys. To wield the full power of the Nexus, you must prove yourself worthy. Chen Hao glanced at Lin Yu, who gave him a subtle nod.
We've got your back, she said.
With a deep breath, he stepped onto the platform. The keys on his arm flared to life, and the world around him seemed to dissolve into light.
The trial of the Nexus.
Chen Hao found himself standing in a vast, empty expanse, the ground beneath his feet made of shimmering glass. The Sentinel's voice echoed around him.
This is the trial of the Nexus.
You will face 3 challenges, each testing a core aspect of the keys: adaptability, unity, and defiance.
Succeed, and you will unlock the true potential of the Nexus.
Fail, and the keys will be lost to you forever.
Before he could respond, the first challenge began. Challenge 1, Adaptability. The glassy floor shifted, transforming into a battlefield strewn with obstacles.
Overseer drones appeared, their movements unpredictable and erratic. Chen Hao's spear materialized in his hands, and he instinctively fell into a defensive stance. The drones attacked in coordinated waves, forcing him to adapt his strategy with each move. He dodged, parried, and countered, his body moving with a precision he hadn't known he possessed. As the last drone fell, the battlefield dissolved, and the Sentinel's voice returned. You have proven your ability to adapt in the face of chaos. Prepare for the next challenge.
Challenge 2, Unity.
Chen Hao was transported to a new setting, a dense forest filled with shadowy figures. These figures resembled his teammates, but their faces were obscured.
Lead them, the Sentinel's voice commanded. The shadowy figures moved hesitantly, their paths disjointed and chaotic.
Chen Hao realized that they couldn't see the threats around them: traps, pitfalls, and enemies lurking in the shadows. Follow me, he called out, guiding them through the dangers. He used his spear to clear obstacles and provided support when they faltered. Gradually, the figures began to synchronize with his movements, their chaos giving way to coordinated action. When they reached the edge of the forest, the shadows melted away, revealing his true teammates standing beside him. "You have demonstrated the power of unity," the Sentinel said. "Now, face the final challenge."
Challenge 3, Defiance.
The world shifted again, and Chen Hao found himself standing before a towering figure, an overseer unlike any he had faced.
Its form was massive, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light.
"You cannot win," the overseer said, its voice a mixture of scorn and certainty. "Surrender, and I will spare your world." Chen Hao tightened his grip on his spear.
"No deal."
The overseer attacked with relentless force, its blows shaking the ground beneath him. Chen Hao fought back with everything he had, refusing to back down even as his body screamed in protest. In the final moments of the battle, the keys on his arm flared brighter than ever before. A surge of energy coursed through him, and he unleashed a powerful strike that shattered the overseer's form.
The Nexus unleashed.
When the light faded, Chen Hao was back on the platform. The Sentinel stood before him, its expression unreadable. "You have passed the trial of the Nexus," it said.
"The keys are now yours to command."
The keys on Chen Hao's arm transformed, merging into a single, intricate artifact that pulsed with an otherworldly light. "This is the Nexus," the Sentinel explained. "With it, you can harness the full potential of the Keymaker's legacy.
But be warned, the Overseers will sense its activation.
They will stop at nothing to destroy you."
Chen Hao nodded, his resolve unshaken. "Let them come. We'll be ready." Preparing for war.
Back at the base, Chen Hao shared what he had learned with his team. The Nexus activation marked a turning point in their fight against the Overseers, but it also painted a target on their backs.
"We've got the power," Liang Wei said, holding up his crowbar.
"Now we just need to figure out how to use it." Dr. Lu Mei was already analyzing the Nexus energy output. "This changes everything," she said. "If we can integrate this with our existing tech, we might be able to create weapons and defenses strong enough to repel an Overseer invasion."
Lin Yu crossed her arms. "Good. Because they're coming. And this time, we'll make sure they regret it."
Chen Hao looked at his team, his determination mirrored in their faces. The fight ahead would be their greatest challenge yet, but for the first time, they had a chance to turn the tide. "Let's get to work," he said.
Chapter 20, The Overseer's Retaliation.
The Sentinel's warning rang clear in Chen Hao's mind as he stood before his team. The Nexus, now embedded in his arm, pulsed faintly, a living artifact of unimaginable power. It was a beacon, drawing the Overseers closer with every passing moment. Dr. Lu Mei worked furiously at her console, scanning the surrounding atmosphere for anomalies.
"The Nexus is emitting a low-frequency signal," she said, her brow furrowed.
"It's subtle, but the Overseers will pick it up soon if they haven't already."
"How soon are we talking?"
Lin Yu asked, leaning over the table where the holographic map of the region flickered with updates.
Dr. Lu Mei hesitated. "Hours. A day at most."
Chen Hao nodded, his jaw tight. "Then we need to prepare."
Strengthening the base.
The team sprang into action, fortifying their base for the inevitable assault. Under Dr. Lu Mei's guidance, they began integrating the Nexus energy signature into their defenses. The Nexus power amplified their shields, creating a protective barrier stronger than anything they'd used before.
Liang Wei worked alongside the engineers, rigging traps and automated turrets at key points around the perimeter. "If they're coming, let's make sure they regret it," he said, tightening a bolt on one of the turrets.
Lin Yu led a squad in training, drilling them in new combat techniques tailored to counter Overseer tactics. "They've underestimated us before," she told her team.
"We'll make sure they don't live to do it again." Despite their efforts, a sense of unease hung in the air.
The Nexus power was undeniable, but it also carried a heavy burden.
The Overseers wouldn't hold back this time. The Overseer's arrival.
Just as Dr. Lu Mei predicted, the Overseers didn't take long to respond. Alarms blared throughout the base as a rift opened in the sky, crackling with dark energy. From it emerged an Overseer battleship, its sleek, ominous form casting a shadow over the base. Chen Hao and his team gathered in the command center, watching as drones and smaller ships poured out of the rift. This isn't just an attack, Linyu said, her voice grim.
This is an invasion.
The sentinel appeared in a holographic projection, its serene demeanor unchanged.
The overseers will stop at nothing to claim the Nexus. But their arrogance blinds them to the truth. They cannot control what they do not understand.
Chen Hao tightened his grip on his spear.
Then we show them what they're up against. The battle begins. The overseers launched their assault with overwhelming force, their drones swarming the base like a tidal wave. The fortified defenses held strong at first, the Nexus enhanced shield absorbing the initial impact.
Liang Wei manned one of the turrets, picking off drones with deadly precision.
These things just keep coming, he shouted over the din of battle.
Dr. Lu Mei monitored the energy levels from the command center.
The shield is holding, but the Nexus is drawing more power than expected.
We'll need to stabilize it, or the entire system could overload.
Chen Hao fought at the front lines, his spear a blur as he cut through the drones. The Nexus pulsed in sync with his movements, each strike sending shockwaves through the enemy ranks.
Linyu fought beside him, her dual blades flashing as she intercepted a group of drones trying to flank the team.
We can't hold this line forever, she said, her voice strained.
We don't need to, Chen Hao replied, his eyes locked on the overseer battleship hovering above.
We just need to take out their command ship. A bold plan. Back in the command center, Chen Hao outlined his plan. The overseer battleship is controlling the drones.
If we take it out, we cut off their coordination.
Dr. Lu Mei nodded.
The Nexus can amplify a directed energy blast strong enough to breach their shields.
But you'll need to get close to deliver it.
I'll go, Chen Hao said without hesitation.
Lin Yu stepped forward. Not alone, you won't. I'm coming with you.
Liang Wei grinned, slinging his crowbar over his shoulder.
You're not leaving me behind either. Someone's gotta keep things interesting. The sentinel appeared, its holographic form flickering.
The Nexus will guide you, but be warned, the Overseer's command ship is heavily guarded.
This will not be an easy task. Chen Hao met its gaze. It doesn't have to be easy. It just has to work.
The assault on the battleship. Under the cover of the base's defenses, Chen Hao, Linyu, and Liang Wei boarded a small, cloaked vessel. Dr. Lu Mei piloted the craft, navigating through the chaos of the battlefield.
Hold on, she said as the ship weaved through the swarm of drones. We're coming up on their shields. The Nexus activated, sending a pulse of energy that created a brief opening in the battleship's defenses.
The ship slipped through, landing in one of the docking bays.
The team disembarked, weapons at the ready.
The interior of the battleship was a stark contrast to its sleek exterior, dark, cold, and filled with an oppressive energy.
This place gives me the creeps, Liang Wei muttered, his crowbar raised. Stay focused, Chen Hao said, leading the way. They encountered resistance almost immediately. Overseer drones poured into the corridors, their attacks relentless. But the team fought with precision and determination, each of them pushing their limits.
Finally, they reached the command center, a massive chamber dominated by a central console glowing with Overseer symbols.
This is it, Dr. Lu Mei said, her voice crackling through their calms. Chen Hao, the Nexus is ready. Channel its power into the console, and it should overload their systems. The power of the Nexus. Chen Hao stepped forward, the Nexus glowing brightly on his arm. As he placed his hand on the console, the Overseer captain appeared, a towering figure cloaked in darkness. You dare defy us, it snarled, its voice echoing with anger. The Nexus will be your undoing.
The captain lunged, its massive form moving with terrifying speed. Chen Hao barely dodged in time, countering with a powerful strike from his spear. Lin Yu and Liang Wei joined the fight, their coordinated attacks keeping the captain off balance. Meanwhile, the Nexus continued to charge, its energy building to a crescendo.
Almost there. Dr. Lu Mei's voice called out. Chen Hao dodged another strike, then leaped forward, driving his spear into the captain's core. The Overseer let out a deafening roar as its form disintegrated, its essence absorbed by the Nexus.
With the path clear, Chen Hao unleashed the Nexus power into the console. A surge of energy rippled through the battleship, disabling its systems and triggering a chain reaction.
Time to go!
Lin Yu shouted as alarms blared throughout the ship.
Victory and loss.
The team barely made it back to their ship as the battleship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The remaining drones fell lifeless, their connection severed. Back at the base, cheers erupted as the team returned. For the first time, they had not only survived but struck a decisive blow against the overseers. But as the celebration died down, Chen Hao couldn't shake the sentinel's words, "The overseers will stop at nothing to destroy you."
"This is just the beginning," he said quietly, looking at the Nexus. "We've won today, but the real war is still ahead."
The Nexus pulsed faintly, as if in agreement, and Chen Hao knew their greatest challenges were yet to come.
Chapter 22: The Prime Overseer's Arrival.
The next morning dawned with an eerie stillness. The team stood ready, their weapons in hand and their resolve unshakable. The Nexus chamber thrummed with power, its glow illuminating the command center as the final preparations were made. The Sentinel's voice echoed across the room. "The Prime Overseer will breach the rift within minutes.
Its arrival will destabilize this region, creating catastrophic environmental effects. Once it manifests, you must act swiftly."
Dr. Lumei's holographic display showed the rift growing larger, a swirling mass of dark energy. Lightning crackled across the sky, and the ground beneath the base trembled.
"It's happening," Lin Yu said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air.
Chen Hao gripped his spear, the Nexus glowing brightly on his arm.
"Everyone knows their role. Stick to the plan, and we'll get through this." The rift opens.
A deafening roar shook the ground as the rift tore open completely.
From within emerged the Prime Overseer, its form towering and alien, radiating an aura of pure power. Its massive frame was clad in obsidian armor, and its glowing eyes burned with intelligence and malice.
The Overseer spoke, its voice reverberating across the battlefield. "Mortals, surrender the Nexus, and I may spare your world."
Chen Hao stepped forward, his voice unwavering. "We don't bow to tyrants."
The Prime Overseer laughed, a deep, menacing sound.
"Foolish. Then you will be the first to fall."
The creature raised a massive hand, unleashing a wave of energy that slammed into the base's shields. The Nexus-enhanced barrier held, but the strain was visible as cracks began to form.
Coordinated resistance. The team sprang into action. Liang Wei and his squad manned the turrets, targeting the Overseer's drones that poured out of the rift to flank the base.
The Nexus-powered weapons cut through the drones with ease, but their numbers seemed endless. Lin Yu led a strike team on the ground, engaging the Overseer's vanguard in close combat. Her dual blades flashed as she moved with precision and grace, taking down enemies twice her size. Dr. Lumei coordinated the defense from the command center, her hands flying across the console.
"The shields won't hold much longer," she warned. "Chen, it's up to you to neutralize the Overseer."
Chen Hao nodded, his grip tightening on his spear.
"I'm on it." The Nexus unleashed.
Chen Hao stepped onto the battlefield, the Nexus glowing brighter with each step. The Prime Overseer turned its gaze toward him, its eyes narrowing. "So, the Nexus chooses you," it said, its tone mocking. "A weak vessel for such a powerful artifact."
"We'll see about that," Chen Hao replied. The Nexus pulsed, sending a wave of energy through his body.
Chen Hao felt its power coursing through him, sharpening his senses and strengthening his resolve. He charged at the Overseer, his spear glowing with Nexus energy. The clash was monumental. Each strike of Chen Hao's spear collided with the Overseer's massive blade, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The Nexus amplified his speed and strength, allowing him to hold his own against the towering foe.
But the Overseer was no ordinary enemy.
It adapted quickly, countering Chen Hao's attacks with devastating precision. The battlefield became a blur of energy and destruction as the two titans clashed.
The team's sacrifice.
As the battle raged on, the team realized that Chen Hao couldn't defeat the Overseer alone. Lin Yu, Liang Wei, and the others joined the fight, targeting the Overseer's weak points to create openings for Chen Hao.
"Keep it distracted," Lin Yu shouted, slicing through one of the Overseer's armor plates. Liang Wei threw himself into the fray, using his crowbar to disable one of the Overseer's energy conduits. Chen, now's your chance, he yelled. Chen Hao seized the opportunity, channeling the Nexus power into a devastating strike.
His spear pierced through the overseer's chest, sending a shockwave of energy that caused the massive creature to stagger. But the victory was short-lived. The overseer roared in rage, unleashing a blast of energy that sent the team flying. Chen Hao barely managed to shield Lin Yu as debris rained down around them. "We can't keep this up," Dr. Lu Mei's voice crackled over the comms.
"Chen, you need to activate the Nexus ultimate ability. The final gambit."
The sentinel appeared beside Chen Hao, its voice calm despite the chaos. "The Nexus is ready, but its ultimate ability requires complete synchronization.
This will take everything you have." Chen Hao nodded, determination in his eyes. "Do it."
The Nexus pulsed violently as Chen Hao raised his spear.
The fragments embedded within it glowed, their energy converging into a single point.
A sphere of light formed at the tip of the spear, growing brighter with each passing second. The Prime Overseer sensed the danger and lunged at Chen Hao, its massive blade poised to strike.
But Lin Yu and Liang Wei intercepted the attack, holding the Overseer back with everything they had. "Finish it, Chen!"
Lin Yu shouted, her voice strained. Chen Hao let out a battle cry as he hurled the spear toward the Prime Overseer. The sphere of light exploded on impact, engulfing the creature in a blinding flash.
The ground shook as the Overseer's form disintegrated, its energy dissipating into the void. Aftermath.
When the light faded, the battlefield was silent. The Prime Overseer was gone, its presence erased by the Nexus power. The rift began to collapse, the dark energy receding as the sky cleared.
Chen Hao dropped to his knees, the Nexus dimming as its energy stabilized. Lin Yu and Liang Wei rushed to his side, both of them battered but alive.
"We did it," Lin Yu said, her voice filled with relief. Dr. Lu Mei's voice crackled over the comms.
"The rift is closing.
We've bought ourselves some time."
The sentinel appeared, its form flickering.
"You have achieved a great victory, but the Overseers will not stop. The Nexus power is a beacon, and they will return with greater force." Chen Hao looked at his team, their faces weary but resolute.
"Then we'll be ready. Together." The Nexus pulsed faintly, as if acknowledging his words.
The battle was won, but the war was far from over.
Chapter 23, The Aftershock of Victory. The battlefield was still as the last echoes of the Prime Overseer's destruction faded.
Smoke and ash hung in the air, mingling with the faint glow of the Nexus in Chen Hao's arm. The rift was gone, its dark energy fully sealed, but the aftermath of the battle was clear. The base, though still standing, bore the scars of the fight: collapsed walls, scorched ground, and the wreckage of automated defenses. Chen Hao rose slowly, his body heavy from the Nexus exertion. Lin Yu and Liang Wei supported him as they made their way back to the base. Around them, survivors emerged from the rubble, their expressions a mixture of relief and disbelief. "We really did it," Lin Yu murmured, glancing back at the spot where the Prime Overseer had fallen.
"For now," Liang Wei added, his tone cautious.
"That thing was just a scout compared to what's probably out there."
Chen Hao nodded. "Then we need to get stronger." The Sentinel's warning.
The team gathered in the command center, their wounds hastily bandaged and their energy drained. Dr. Lu Mei brought up a holographic display of the battle data, her expression grim.
"The Nexus ultimate ability worked, but it left us vulnerable," she said.
"Chen, the energy signature from your attack was massive.
If there are other Overseers in this sector, they'll have detected it." The Sentinel's hologram appeared beside her. "Dr. Lu Mei is correct.
The Nexus has drawn the Overseer's attention. They will likely send more powerful forces to retrieve it."
Liang Wei frowned. "More powerful than the Prime Overseer?"
"That thing nearly wiped us out." "The Overseers have entire fleets at their disposal," the Sentinel replied. "The Prime Overseer was a vanguard.
The next wave will be an armada." Silence fell over the room as the weight of the Sentinel's words sank in. "What can we do?"
Lin Yu asked, breaking the silence. Chen Hao stepped forward, his expression resolute.
"We prepare. The Nexus has more to it than we've unlocked. We need to find its secrets before the overseers strike again. The sentinel nodded. The fragments you retrieved are just the beginning. The Nexus was designed to evolve with its wielder. But unlocking its full potential will require guidance from those who created it. Dr. Lu Mei's eyes widened. You mean the keymakers? Yes, the sentinel said. Their knowledge is the key to mastering the Nexus. However, their civilization was destroyed long ago. Traces of their existence remain, but finding them will be dangerous. Chen Hao looked at his team. We don't have a choice. If we don't learn to harness the Nexus power, the next attack will destroy us. A new mission. The Sentinel brought up a map of the planet, highlighting several locations. These sites were once Keymaker strongholds. If their archives survived, they may contain the information you need. One of the locations caught Lin Yu's attention. This one's in the frozen expanse. That place is a death trap. It is also the most likely to contain intact archives, the Sentinel said. The extreme conditions may have preserved the Keymaker's technology. Liang Wei groaned. Great! Ice, snow, and killer robots. Just what we needed. Dr. Lu Mei tapped the map. We'll need to split up again. While one team heads to the frozen expanse, the rest of US should stay here to rebuild and fortify the base. Chen Hao nodded. Agreed. I'll lead the expedition to the frozen expanse. Lin Yu, you're with me. Liang Wei, stay here and work with Dr. Lu Mei on defenses. Liang Wei saluted mockingly. Got it, boss. Try not to freeze out there. Into the frozen expanse. The journey to the frozen expanse was grueling. The landscape was a barren wasteland of ice and snow, with howling winds that cut through even the thickest gear. Chen Hao and Lin Yu pushed forward, their Nexus-powered suits protecting them from the worst of the elements. The ruins of the Keymaker's stronghold loomed ahead, half buried in ice. Its once majestic towers were now crumbling, and the air was thick with an eerie silence. This place gives me the creeps, Lin Yu muttered, her breath visible in the freezing air. Chen Hao tightened his grip on his spear. Stay alert. The Sentinel said the Keymakers left behind defenses to protect their archives. As they entered the ruins, the air grew colder, and the Nexus began to glow faintly. It's reacting to something, Chen Hao said, his voice echoing in the icy halls. Lin Yu pointed to a faint light ahead. There. That's got to be the archive. They moved cautiously, their footsteps crunching on the frozen ground. Suddenly, the walls came alive, revealing automated drones that had been dormant for centuries. Defenses, Lin Yu said, drawing her blades. Chen Hao raised his spear, the Nexus flaring to life. Let's take them out. The archives awaken. The battle was swift but intense. The drones were fast and relentless, their energy weapons cutting through the icy air. But Chen Hao and Lin Yu fought with precision, their teamwork honed by countless battles. As the last drone fell, the archive's core activated, a beam of light projecting a holographic figure. It was a Keymaker, its form ethereal and ancient. Wielder of the Nexus, the figure said, its voice calm and otherworldly. You have proven yourself worthy to access our knowledge. Chen Hao stepped forward. We need to know how to use the Nexus to stop the Overseers. They're coming for us. The Keymaker nodded. The Nexus is more than a weapon. It is a gateway, a bridge to infinite possibilities. But unlocking its true power will require understanding its connection to the Overseers and the Rift. The hologram shifted, displaying intricate diagrams of the Nexus. To master it, you must find the heart of the Nexus, a device hidden deep within this planet. It is the source of its power and the key to its ultimate ability. Lin Yu glanced at Chen Hao. Looks like we've got our next mission. Chen Hao nodded. Then let's find it. The fate of our world depends on it. Chapter 24, The Heart of the Nexus. The holographic Keymaker's revelation about the heart of the Nexus sent a ripple of urgency through Chen Hao and Lin Yu. The artifact, the source of the Nexus' limitless power, was hidden somewhere deep within the planet. Retrieving it could be the only way to stand against the Overseer's inevitable return. Where exactly is this heart located? Chen Hao asked, the faint glow of the Nexus illuminating the frozen ruins around them. The hologram flickered, projecting a detailed map.
The heart lies beneath the obsidian abyss, a chasm carved into the planet's crust during the final days of the Keymaker War. Its depth and complexity have kept it hidden from the Overseers, but also from those who would seek its power for noble causes. Be warned, however, the abyss is not unguarded.
Lin Yu stepped closer, studying the map. Sounds like a trap waiting to happen.
It is a test, the hologram clarified. Only those who demonstrate courage, intellect, and unity can access the heart. Your journey will be fraught with challenges, but the rewards are unparalleled. Chen Hao exchanged a glance with Lin Yu.
We don't have a choice.
The Overseers will be back, and we need every advantage we can get. The hologram began to fade, but its final words lingered.
The heart will recognize your resolve.
Trust in its guidance, and you may yet prevail.
Return to the base.
The trip back to the base was uneventful, though the weight of the mission ahead loomed over Chen Hao and Lin Yu. As they approached the fortified outpost, the scars of the recent battle were still evident.
Walls were being reinforced, and Nexus-powered weapons lined the perimeter. Liang Wei was the first to greet them.
You're back.
I assume the Ice Palace didn't have any warm hospitality?
Lin Yu smirked.
More like killer drones and cryptic holograms.
Chen Hao stepped forward, addressing the group gathered in the command center.
We've got a new lead.
The heart of the Nexus is hidden in a place called the Obsidian Abyss.
It's our next objective.
Dr. Lu Mei frowned as she brought up the map.
The Obsidian Abyss. That region has been uncharted for centuries.
If the Keymakers chose it as a hiding place, it's probably for good reason. The Sentinel materialized beside her.
The Abyss is one of the most dangerous locations on this planet. Reaching the heart will require not only strength but also ingenuity.
The Overseers may have already detected its presence.
Liang Wei crossed his arms. So we're diving headfirst into a death trap while the rest of us hold down the fort? Chen Hao nodded. That's the plan. Lin Yu and I will lead the expedition.
Liang, you and Dr. Lu may keep the base secure and prepare for another attack. If the Overseers come back, you'll need to buy us time.
Liang Wei sighed but gave a crooked grin. No pressure, right? Journey to the Abyss.
Chen Hao, Lin Yu, and a small team of elite fighters departed the next morning, guided by the Sentinel's map. The journey took them across treacherous terrain, deserts of shifting sand, forests teeming with strange creatures, and mountains that seemed to pierce the clouds. As they approached the Obsidian Abyss, the land grew darker and more desolate. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, and the ground beneath them seemed to pulse faintly, as though alive. This place doesn't feel right, Lin Yu muttered, gripping her blades tightly.
Chen Hao nodded. Stay sharp. We don't know what we're walking into.
The abyss itself was a vast chasm that stretched beyond the horizon. Its walls were lined with jagged black stone, and a faint, otherworldly light emanated from its depths. The Sentinel's voice guided them.
The entrance lies within the abyss. Proceed with caution. The Heart's Guardians will not allow intruders to pass easily. Descent into darkness. The team used advanced climbing gear and Nexus-powered grappling hooks to descend into the chasm.
The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls, and the faint hum of ancient machinery echoed around them. At the bottom of the abyss, they found an enormous door etched with Keymaker runes.
The Nexus on Chen Hao's arm began to glow brighter, resonating with the door's energy.
This is it, he said, stepping forward. As he placed his hand on the door, the runes lit up, and the ground shook. The door creaked open, revealing a vast chamber filled with glowing crystals and intricate machinery. But the moment they stepped inside, the Guardians activated. Massive constructs, shaped like humanoid golems but made of living stone and metal, emerged from the walls. Their eyes glowed with cold intelligence as they moved to intercept the intruders.
Here we go!
Lin Yu shouted, charging at the nearest Guardian.
The Trial of the Heart. The battle was unlike anything they had faced before. The Guardians were relentless, their movements precise and their attacks devastating. But Chen Hao and his team fought with determination, using their combined skills and the Nexus power to hold their ground. As the fight raged on, Chen Hao noticed the patterns in the Guardians' movements. "They're not just attacking," he said, dodging a strike. "They're testing us." Lin Yu parried a blow, her blade sparking against the Guardian's arm. "Testing us for what?" "The heart," Chen Hao replied. "It's watching us. We need to prove we're worthy." With this realization, the team changed their approach. Instead of fighting to destroy the Guardians, they focused on working together, using strategy and coordination to overcome the challenges. As they defeated the last Guardian, the chamber began to glow. A pedestal rose from the center, and atop it lay the heart of the Nexus, a pulsating sphere of pure energy, its surface swirling with colors beyond comprehension. The heart awakened. Chen Hao approached the heart, the Nexus on his arm glowing in response. As he touched it, a surge of energy coursed through him, filling his mind with visions. He saw the Keymaker's final days, their desperate fight against the Overseers, and their decision to hide the heart to protect its power. The heart spoke, its voice ancient and resonant. "You have proven your resolve, wielder. The power of the Nexus is now yours to command. Use it wisely, for the Overseers will stop at nothing to reclaim it." Chen Hao nodded, his grip tightening on the heart. "We'll be ready." As the team began their ascent out of the abyss, the heart's energy infused the Nexus, unlocking new abilities and strengthening their bond. But as they reached the surface, a shadow loomed on the horizon. Overseer ships were descending, their massive forms blocking out the sun. "They're here," Lin Yu said, her voice grim. Chen Hao looked at the heart, its glow steady and defiant. "Then it's time to finish this."